and thank you all. Let's get ourselves started here. This is the March meeting of the Wyoming Board of Education, our regular meeting. If you will, we'll call this meeting, I will call this meeting to order. If you'll do a roll call, please.
Mr. Feldmeyer.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. G.
Here.
Mrs. Zoller.
Here.
Mrs. Broderick.
All right, thank you. Will you all join me with the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to adopt our agenda as printed? Thank you. Second. Roll call?
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mrs. G.
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller.
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick.
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Recognition of the public. We do have one person, Kirsten Grimes. Would you like to come up now? You have a choice. We have a
I need to stay in my seat.
You can do that, but we record our regular meetings, so we kind of need you up where the camera will see you and the video. Sorry about that. You may come up, there is,
Move that up.
right there, and you can roll it around to wherever you'd like.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, no problem. Okay, just voice. Perfect. Thank you so much. So hello, my name is Kristen Grimes. I had moved to Wyoming from out of state in the summer of 2023. I have 3 children. I have, my oldest is at Vermont in the 3rd grade. My middle child, my youngest is 3, so she's not here until 2027. And, my middle child is, you pay for his schooling, but he's in the Head Start program through, preschool early Head Start. And so, I just come here to urge you to stand up for our children with special needs in this district. I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I just want to make sure that going forward, the recent shutdown of the Federal Department of Education, by the president has furthered my fears, for my child and all children that require special needs. Unfortunately, I feel like we will have to say this over and over and over again to get our point across. Now, again, that poor horse, but, Wyoming's reputation for special services is known and it's not good. On many public forums, there's people asking if they're moving to Ohio, they're moving to Cincinnati, where should they go to school? What district should they be in? I was one of those people. I knew that we were moving to Cincinnati at some point in my husband's career. We're gonna be here 3 years or 30 years. So I have been invested in knowing the neighborhoods, and Wyoming was always on one of the top, was always top of my list. And I knew the reputation going forward. I still chose this community because I love this. The feeling, we all know, we all live here. We love this community. And we want to fight for it and we want to make it better. The recent audit conducted last year validated and verified my fears. There are not adequate supports available for some of our students, especially in regards to educational aides and paraprofessionals in the classroom. And that was something that Wyoming expressed in Mr. Weber's, presentation in January, that's something that is one of the more immediate concerns that we, and again, with, the more recent national news, what is that going to mean for Wyoming? I don't know what our funding looks like as far as what comes from federal funding, but I do know IDEA is at risk. And just my question to you now is, how are we preparing to fill those deficits when we already had deficits of our own? And I know we're actively working towards that. I am extremely excited for Dr. Kirshner to take charge. I am beyond thrilled. I feel very confident in her abilities, and I feel very, personally, what is the word I'm looking for, validated by just speaking to her and her helping me just feel confident in going forward with my children in this district. So, what are we doing in the wake of any federal funding cuts? And just, I don't know what else to say. I mean, those of us, we cannot always move out of the district. So many families, especially young families, they choose not to put their children here. They say, you know what, I'm not gonna let my child be a guinea pig. There's a direct quote from myself when I have looked at other districts, but not all families can afford to do that. So I just wanna make sure we're all on the right foot, and I know we have such big hurdles, especially with the new primary schools, but if we could just get creative in providing that support for this next year. I am worried that many of the things going forward won't go into place for a few years. And I have my child specifically will get put further and further and further behind. So many times you don't hear a parent speak until their child's in middle school or in high school. You don't always hear parents with young children coming and begging for help because they're at home with their kids, putting them to bed right now. They just got them home from soccer practice, or they got done taking them to a doctor's appointment, or PT or OT, or any of these extra things. So just please help fight for us, because there are so many parents that I know won't be able to come because of their own personal, whatever they have going on. And like I said, it's 7:09, babies are getting put to bed right now. So, anyway, I thank you for your time. I would love to speak to any of you personally, if that is something you want to hear the rest of my story. We did have quite a journey with special services throughout the last couple of years. But like I said, I am happy for the future, and I'm really excited for this new wave. Let's just hope we can just continue to go upward enough. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate those thoughts that are incorporated in our minutes. Thank you. We'll go on to the CAC presentation. This is the next item on our agenda, and I believe you have something behind me, right? Yes.
So-
I need to get this light.
I'll speak as people are shuffling around, excited about this team, and this team is the best practices for students and staff in utilizing temporary instructional spaces. They presented to our CAC at our last meeting and presenting to the board tonight, so excited about their research and the information and recommendations that work will bring to us. Well, I'll let you
Are you
guys
ready?
go ahead and get started. Yes.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, first of all, for letting us be here and for all of your guys' work throughout the year. Our committee was the committee in charge of the temporary instructional spaces. As you know, our district is about to undergo a massive project. So our committee was formed to help ensure that this transition can go as smoothly as possible for the community members, the staff members, families, and all students mainly. So my name's Emily Burton. I have a first grader at Elm, and then I'll have a kindergartner at Elm next year, and then we will have another kindergartner in 4 years.
I'm Sandy Zeesley. I am the speech language pathologist at Elm and Vermont, and I'm one of the primary staff members of the team.
I'm Erin Henley. I'm a second grade teacher at Elm Primary, and the other staff member on the team.
I'm Stephanie Denton, and I'm a parent, and I have a sophomore at the high school.
I'm Seth Schreiber. I have 3 children in the district, a sophomore in high school, a 7th grader, and a 4th grader at Vermont. So,
And I'm Amanda Paizola, and I have 3 kids, a 6th grader at the middle school, a 3rd grader, and a 1st grader both at home. And then Joe is our chair, and he is off on a work trip in London. So we're all cold. But he's probably hardworking.
I'm probably sleeping.
Okay, and, our big resources throughout this whole, project, Tim Weber, Mr. Weber, and Rhonda Johnson, and then Dr. Kirchner. There were a lot of others, but, just to give a little recognition there. Study objectives were firstly to maintain and find best practices for optimizing the educational experiences through these temporary environments. Establish strategies to maintain Wyoming's high standards of teaching and learning during the transition. Provide guidance on ensuring staff and students can adapt to these interim spaces. Also to minimize all the disruptions and maximize educational outcomes throughout the construction periods. Methodology and research were, we conducted surveys, interviews with teachers, administrators, staff members, anyone that had firsthand insight on concerns that might come up, logistical challenges. And then we talked to them about what they thought could be solutions to those too. We were able to speak with the architects on this project, also the architects that worked on the last Wyoming big project that was very helpful because they had a lot of insight on challenges that happened there too. School planners, logistical experts to help understand the design and the infrastructure of the modular classrooms and now the alternative temporary spaces that we'll be using. And then key logistical components, drop off, pickup, procedures, busing, recess. There was a whole lot to consider. Safety, securities, and all of this just to help provide a smooth transition during those processes. Continuing its access to technology, climate control, storage was a big concern, the classroom layouts, bringing teachers in to help us understand how the classrooms should be laid out, optimizing learning environments, all while minimizing the disruptions in this process. A significant emphasis was placed on surveying teachers that had done this in the past. So the middle school teachers, we were able to speak with a lot of them, and some of them provided lots and lots of feedback. So that was really helpful because they've been through it and they want to help, you know, all the primary school teachers as they go through that. And then using the collected data and insights to formulate actionable recommendations, things that we can actually, you know, procedurally line out and hopefully make that as smooth as possible. With as minimal disruptions to the staff, families, the students, and the community as a whole. Key takeaways: safety and security, accessibility, the well-being of the teachers, maintaining privacy, improved storage options, technology, weather plans, traffic flow, creating a new traffic flow, lunch, recess, gym, and proactive engagement.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about is safety and security. We are recommending that we implement some strict security measures, you know, things such as fencing around the temporary spaces. I know when we had the middle school students, they're much bigger, much older, but with our primary students, you really need to make sure that we can maintain them on the property where we are. that we have key card access into buildings so that only the people who are supposed to be in the buildings are able to get in with those controlled entry points that really are going to enhance the safety of those instructional spaces that we are going to be looking at. Make sure that we review security policies and procedures with all of the staff. Make sure that we have reliable fire and security systems. One of the issues when we renovated the middle school was when every time the heat turned on, the fire alarm went off in the modulars. So just really knowing ahead of time that, hey, this might happen, and how are we gonna deal with that? Or hopefully make sure that that doesn't happen. And then another safety concern from the last time we had to look at instructional spaces, everything was gravel around the modular units. And that was all fine and good until it snowed, or there was ice. And then it made it really hard for, snow removal and making those surfaces safe for people. And I believe that we did end up having to do some blacktopping in around those spaces before, but to do that initially from the very beginning. That we're going to talk about accessibility. We need to make sure that we provide accessible temporary spaces so that we can include all students of all, regardless of their mobility. We need to make sure that we allow for the movement of instructional materials from one building to the next. If we are looking at multiple modular units and we have specialist teachers that are moving from building to building, like we have moving in our buildings right now, we need to make sure that they can get their materials, so, ramps or whatever we need to be able to move those carts. And again, just highlighting there that we need to make sure that we have pathways between modular units, because students are going to be moving back and forth between buildings. They need to be smooth, they need to be wide, they need to be weather resistant, accommodate wheelchairs, walkers, any other mobility aids, and making sure that we're not going to prevent them from being able to access.
Great. Talking about teacher well-being in private spaces. So one thing that kind of came up when we interviewed the middle school teachers was there was no private spaces for them to work with students, for them to kind of have a spot for them to like decompress during the day, things like that, grade work, prepare lessons, make personal phone calls that we all have during the day. So we need a separate space for that. Also just a separate space that they can handle student matters that they might need to. And then just, again, those spaces to give teachers sufficient break time during the school day. Plus we all need that a little bit. And then improved storage options. So the big thing was right away communicate storage options with teachers. We found when we interviewed the middle school teachers that they did not know what their, or a lot of them said that they did not know what to bring. They did not know how much they should bring, if they would have access to anything again. So kind of just laying out like, you need to bring this stuff, you don't need to bring this stuff kind of thing. This is what you will have access to, this is what you won't have access to. And just help us for like when we're preparing to pack and unpack at the end of the year and the beginning of the year, so we know. Seeking off-site storage that will be accessible throughout the transition period. So the middle school teacher said that their stuff was loaded on a truck and then kind of not seen again. So making sure that we have access to it, or we know we don't have access to it, so we are prepared for it until we move into the new buildings. And then ensure that the storage will be available in the temporary space and classroom assignments. Again, we know that storage is going to be limited, but making sure we know what is available so that we can kind of prepare when we start packing at the end of the year. Also, if there is a room that has no storage, is there a place that we can kind of get it in a building or in a module, or so that we can access it for them? And then possibly exploring service opportunities for students to help us with as we get ready for the end of the year.
So the next topic on the list was, making sure technology is available and that it is robust. When the middle school was done, yes, technology was important. It's even more important nowadays. Teachers rely even more on Wi-Fi, on smart boards, on all kinds of different things. And when those things don't work well, that really puts, entire days of teaching in jeopardy. So we want to make sure that, reliable Wi-Fi access is there. We want to make sure that there is access to all the other technology pieces that teachers are relying on, smart boards, projectors, anything else that they might be used to. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from during the middle school renovation was that copiers and printers weren't necessarily always easily accessible. They were maybe in one modular unit, but then you had to run, you had to go outside, you had to come around. So, having technology stations, in every temporary structure, not just in a central location, could be a very helpful type of solution to that kind of problem. And to have a very good plan, a distinct timeline for testing that technology ahead of time. So not just assuming that, hey, we've got access points for Wi-Fi, we've got boosters, we've got everything, it'll just work the day we start out, but really have a plan to test that and to make sure that when those teachers and students are coming in the first day, that we know it's gonna work and that nobody's gonna run into problems. The next piece was around emergency planning. So we've already touched on some of that. We need pathways, we need walkways that are not dangerous in inclement weather. Whether that's concrete, blacktop, whatever the case may be. But making sure that those traffic flows are available in an emergency situation. Having plans for what happens if indoor recess is required. Obviously, modular units are going to be smaller, less space available, but it's still going to rain, it's still going to snow. So, make sure that there are plans for those eventualities. And again, this comes back to communication and making sure everybody knows what's happening. Is what happens in an emergency, weather situation, fire drills, when we have modulars outside the middle school, where do those students go in a tornado drill, right? And, all those types of details, and making sure that everybody knows what's happening and is well prepared for those situations, even though we hope they never happen.
Traffic flow solutions was another area we spent some time looking at. We want to make sure we have sufficient planning, coordination, and proactive communication about pickup and drop off. We feel like the middle school space is pretty well set up for that, considering there's pickup and drop off every day that happens here. But just making sure that those parents and families know kind of what's happening. But really focusing on the Friendship Church location, so making sure we're looking at the impact on those surrounding neighborhoods and roads, so Fleming Road, Springfield Pike, and Central Terrace. There was a meeting that some of the team attended with some of those neighbors in that area, and a lot of them were pretty concerned about what that might do to their local traffic in the morning and afternoon. So just making sure we're really taking a look at what that means and being good neighbors and communicating with everyone kind of what's happening. And then we also talked about consider additional busing to alleviate traffic near the church, either by like having central collection points or by reviewing the current busing radius, which I know we talked to Rhonda about might not be an option, but just something to consider. And also even just encouraging parents to take advantage of busing. I feel like people love taking their kids to and from school, but maybe for that year and a half, maybe your kid takes the bus just to kind of make it a little easier on everyone. And then lunch, recess, and gym coordination. So for the middle school especially, a lot of those spaces are going to be shared between the middle school and the primary school. So making sure we have a plan for those shared spaces to make sure there's smooth transitions and access for all students. We talked a little bit about safety earlier, but making sure that there's fencing to keep recess and play structures safe, and making sure we're keeping traffic and then also construction zones at the primary school safe and separate.
And then coordinate scheduling and supervision to prevent overcrowding, minimize conflicts, and maximize student engagement. So this is one thing that came up, with the middle school teachers. So a lot of times, especially in the gym, there were multiple groups using the gym at the same time. And so a lot of times they would end up, like some people would end up in the hallway or like just in other areas trying to find space to do whatever they were trying to do. So we can minimize that or at least let people know in advance, hey, there's gonna be multiple groups in the gym at this time and try to see if there's a way they can kind of work together to hopefully minimize any conflicts and keep the students engaged.
Sorry. So did we just want to talk about proactively being engaged with the teachers, with the students, their families, and the community throughout the whole process? Make sure that we're engaging with teachers on our project timelines so that they, on space planning, materials, planning and storage, schedules for shared spaces, you know, if there are going to be teachers that are sharing spaces, what does that space look like to make sure that we all are good neighbors to each other within the building, but then also that we are good neighbors to our community as well, so that we are proactively communicating with our parents, with the neighbors that are surrounding the middle school. Yes, the middle school is there, but we're gonna have this primary school there now too. And the church is gonna have a whole, that neighborhood is gonna have a whole lot of more neighbors that are in traffic going on in the church congregation to let them know what's going on as well. That we're making sure that we provide them with regular updates on any kind of progress, any changes that are occurring, but just a consistent message there. So just our general recommendations at that top in utmost importance is that consistent engagement, that we have a regular rhythm of communication from designated people, you know, for that designated audience, so that people are aware of what's coming, when it's coming, and to make that easy to digest for sure. And then just making sure that we're flexible and adaptable. We know that there are going to be changes. This is going to be an ever evolving plan and needs that are going to occur. Adjust when we need to. The first week of school might not go the way we expected to go, but that's okay. We have room to improve, and we can do that the following week. You know, specifically looking at that traffic flow, storage constraints, and you know, things like inclement weather that might pop up. And then making sure that all students are safe, that everything is accessible in these modern spaces that are gonna provide us with the robust technology that we need to make sure that we have a high quality, inclusive learning environment for all of our students during this time. So we have some immediate actions that we think are, you know, like right away, what do we need to do? We provided you with a report that has a lot of information in it, but first thoughts of what we really need to work on. Right now, we should be confirming logistics with Hilltop and United Methodist Church. The plan is for this to happen in August. So we need to be assigning rooms to teachers. Can we schedule walkthroughs for teachers so that they can see what those spaces are going to look like? Because they're going to be, I mean, it's available to see. It's not a modular that we get 2 weeks ahead of time kind of thing. So possibly, you know, coordinate a United Methodist Church field trip for everybody. Define those key leadership roles. Who are the leads for, you know, each part of that? Who's going to communicate? Who's going to help move all the equipment and everything that needs to be there? Who is going to be leading that technology? And then, as Fed said, really planning and executing that testing of that to avoid any last minute issues. You know, we all know that the first day of school runs around and technology doesn't work the way that we want it to in the best of times. but when we're actually going into spaces where we haven't been before, this is gonna be even more important to make sure that we look at that ahead of time. Again, assess the storage and resources, that teachers can have, is there a place where we can warehouse things that teachers can have access to? And if not, making sure that they know that so they can have everything they need for the year. And then again, engaging parents on that busing, communicating plans early and often. If you're come drop your student off at United Methodist Church, this is how you do that. And making sure that we have people out there so that we are, continually, correcting those people that just forgot, or, oh my God, this was the way this was okay, and just gently letting them know that, hey, this really is the way to do it this way. And I think, just be good neighbors. Yeah, we need some pet saving, so maybe, especially since it's not as big of an area as it was when we were thinking about the softball fields. Maybe it's just a little bit of area, then we make it really nice. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you. You talked about flexibility and, for those of us who are on CAC, Lee and I, the, flexibility had to be on the part of the committee too, because when we first began, we thought we were putting modulars on the softball field behind the high school and running water and sewer lines and electricity and all that.
I'll tell you, that church made all the difference in the
And
world.
then
with
the
plans.
Methodist Church approached us and new game plan.
Yeah.
Much easier again.
Start over. But thank you. I appreciate that you did that.
In the
And
middle of your project.
We were
That
able
wasn't
to
a-
apply a lot of the same
research into that, so it wasn't.
I would just like to add, I really appreciate just that reminder about communicating with teachers in particular. I mean, we need to communicate with everybody kind of early and often, and, but that idea of like letting teachers know what happened to your stuff, how can you access it, those kind of things I could see maybe, you wouldn't necessarily think of as you're busy with the logistics of planning, but we've had this experience before, and I appreciate you talked to those teachers and people who've been through it. So I found it, as somebody on the facilities committee, really, really helpful and helpful reminders, so.
were there things you talked about, in terms of once we're in these buildings, the difference, I mean, there's obvious differences. It's not the same as the school. We are in smaller, probably classrooms. The shared spaces are all, I mean, there's a music room and an art room, correct? And that's, last I looked at the map, in a library. And so, but were there any suggestions that in your research that came up for how you make that all work over the year and a half?
Planning.
Some of the things that came up were making sure that, that's where storage solutions and those types of things came up. One of the specific things that our art teachers brought up was like, hey, we have very specific shelving requirements that, for they're very narrow, shallow shelves to store artwork, things like that. It's like if it's great to have an art room, but if it's not equipped with, say, a sink to clean brushes and clean things like that, and the proper storage, it makes it very difficult to use. So that it was again mostly about pre-planning the usage of those spaces and making sure that they were equipped for the right activities.
Did you hear anything from teachers or support staff about signage in terms of students identifying with this new location as their school? So first day of school, last day of school, a lot of photos being taken in front of the sign, Hilltop Elm, Vermont, whatever. That's the moment where you mark your time. I'm starting or ending in that grade. Anything come up that we could maybe do something like that, relo or create a sign? It's,
Yeah.
I'm going through this with my senior son, looking back on all of these moments in time. And there's always that photo, first day and the last day in front of the sign. I know those things are heavy, the hilltop sign that, you know, kick things off, but we can't just roll down the hill. You know, to have that, and beyond just that big sign, maybe some of these other things, I know when my kids were coming through the schools, the carrying cowboy became a symbol. And just those little markers of connection that, you know, the classic horseshoe, the W, that kind of thing, where we say, you know, we're borrowing this place, but for now, it's ours. It's our school, and we can connect with some of the traditional symbols or markers that we're used to, and building that kind of traditional connection. But did anybody mention anything about those?
Yes, but to be fair, we didn't focus on that aspect necessarily. We really focused fairly strongly on logistics and operations, and not so much on feelings and.
Sure.
There
No,
There
I
was
get
some,
it.
there was some feedback around it, but not,
There was
we didn't
there
ask a
was
lot of those
feedback
questions.
on the schools that will be demolished.
Yeah.
And there was
Yes.
some like, okay, can we walk through this school one more time? Because that was, you know, the school
Yeah.
50 years ago that I went to, and I still live in the community, and it's gonna be really hard to see it. So that was talked
Sure,
about,
yeah.
but no, that's a great idea. That
There
you
was
should
some-
put somebody on
There
that.
was some feedback around how long the project was going on and how, you know, for certain, like the middle school students, that they were going to be dealing with this for a period of time. So some of that came up, but it didn't, other than let's have a last moment. of-
Sure.
of
Yeah.
Revisiting the old school. that-
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then like,
was-
even like some, I guess, one of the schools, I don't know which one, has like, special tiles or something. So they were like, are they gonna save, you know, people were very, you know, we did get a little bit of feedback on it, but,
Thank you.
yeah.
I thought it was great too, also on facilities, so it was great to just hear a lot of the themes that were sitting in the meetings, getting it started, and these topics are coming up and really talking about a lot of like the flow, so a lot of these things have already been started, but it's great to really think about it differently, and even as much as the service opportunities for students, right, because we keep talking about how to move, you know, like that one's great, because, you know, there's high schoolers or lots of kids who could help with that, but just to reiterate that, the storage alone, like, as much as we talked about moving, it is like, what do you have space for the amount of time? And can you see that stuff or not? But, just really helpful to know that, well, we have a meeting this week even, right? That we'll be talking about it. So the timing of this is really great as well. Thanks for pivoting with the change.
Maybe obvious, given the discussion you just started with that, but if you think about what are the things of a hilltop or an elm or a Vermont that we want to preserve as we take the schools down and then bring them back up, it might be that those are some of the things that you sort of create temporary versions
Right.
of as friendship becomes hilltop,
Right.
as it becomes elm or Vermont, so that as they then transition to the place that they go, there's a continuity. in
Right,
them. So-
that is smart, because you're right, we're having conversation about those like a little bit separately. We were definitely talking about what are you taking down? But I feel like, kind of what you said, Sven, like right now you're in the meetings about logistics, like let's make sure we even have the buildings and then let's make sure we can get them at a certain time and move in and then get to like the next level. So that was really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to capture the comments here in some way too, because I see this product being somewhat of a checklist as we're having our core team meetings. I think these are really, really good ideas. I was just looking at the copier and printers, right? When you have modular units, or even walking within the building, it's not as easy as what you might have in a traditional, school. So, you know, very, very good ideas. I just want to make sure we capture these comments
Yeah.
because we'll look exactly to that product that you created to walk through with our team.
And it's been our usual practice to put your report on our website. It'll be under the Board of Education, and there it will stay for not just the time period that we're building, but as a historical record. So I appreciate it, and sometimes we do projects that that the board is really interested in the information, but maybe doesn't have the money or the time or it's not the right time to put that project in order, but, you know, we have that information we can fall back on. With you, it was like. move
Yeah.
back and-
Yeah.
You know,
We need this, we
clearly are
need
using
this.
We're gonna use it this week.
we are-
Right,
That's
exactly.
right.
Can I ask one more question that, just came up and you sort of alluded to it in talking about needing to understand indoor spaces for play and all of that. Is there anybody talking about, because this is primary versus middle school, and I know we'll have the middle school playground for the primary students, and there's some little play area at Friendship, but anybody talk about like the need for any kind of different play space?
Cause I think the current play space is for the preschool, right?
Yeah,
So there will, yeah.
and they wanna keep that.
It's accessible for young people.
Yeah, that play space is gonna be something that's needed at that Friendship location. It's not there.
We have a space identified, a hard surface play area, where you're gonna have to purchase some.
Yep.
Place, state type things. That would be-
Right.
But there is an area
Yes.
that's like that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The point that you're making, Jane, I think there will be different interest in this project than some that we've had historically as it gets posted and made available. So, you know, as you all led this work, it may be that people reach out to you, you know, asking some of those questions. And so just don't want that to be a surprise or something that's, you know,
Yeah, that's
for you
true.
as now resident experts.
Sure, that is a good point.
And
Thank
I think
you.
that's a really good point. If others are sharing ideas, please, you know, Gina, Rhonda, myself, please reach out to any of us to share those ideas so that we can continue to capture them and use
And
them with
also
this
the board
information.
members, our phone numbers are on the website. Heather and I are on the facilities committee, but you can call any of us and we'll make sure ideas get passed through as well.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. All right, thank you. We're gonna move on to the committee reports. I have a hard time with transitions, you know, I'd like to talk a little bit.
I'm a training curve.
So here we go, transition. The Belonging and Inclusion Collaborative did meet.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
goodbye.
You all don't wanna stay?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, yes,
Okay, wait,
wait one second. We ready?
yeah, I don't know, I got distracted, I'm just watching.
I know.
Belonging and Inclusion.
Yes,
Vic.
we had our meeting on, March, I almost said May, not that far yet, March 18th, and we continued our discussion series at that meeting. The topic was disability inclusion, and it's interesting to hear the report that was presented tonight because it brings back a lot of that conversation. Specifically, one of the things I was thinking about is voice and having, a voice present and thinking about even friendship, maybe, just thinking about accessibility and what does that really, look like? And so Amy Webb presented the discussion and it was a great discussion. And these are just wonderful opportunities to think about what belonging and inclusion looks like within the school district on all kinds of different levels. Great discussions. It was great.
I thought she made a really good point. It's, I mean, something to keep in mind, not just with the primary developments that we're doing, but that he cautioned that accessibility is not the same as inclusiveness, right? Inclusivity, right? That's a dimension of it, but it's not the entirety of it. And to be mindful that there's many more dimensions of being inclusive than just giving access to a room or to a gym or another facility. So it was a very meaningful discussion.
All right, the Citizens Advisory Committee, we have actually, we've met, our second group will present next month. And that's really all there is to say on that one.
Right, and that is the social media team.
Social media team, yes. The next is, district leadership team and student achievement.
Yes, our DLT met on March 20th, just before spring break. We had three big ideas in the conversation. We were talking about the 2025, 2026 potential district goals. Again, those fall into the areas of our pillars of our strategic plan. And so we're really in the brainstorming process right now. How do we capitalize on work that's been done in the past and think about what makes the best plans for our students in the future? And so we began that discussion. We'll continue that we'll be setting up an April meeting for the team to meet and continue those brainstorming sessions. We also spoke about the 2026, 2027 district calendar. That is closely connected to the construction process and the timeline for construction. Probably the biggest takeaway from that calendar, and it has been presented as a first read with the board, is the 3-week break. Sorry, I had to say that slowly. 3-week break at winter break. And that is because we would have more student travel at that time than any other time. Hilltop construction would be complete, so those students would be moving to their new facility. So exciting to even have this conversation right now. And then Vermont students would be moving from their current location into Friendship United Methodist Church. And then the other topic we spoke about was the interim reporting process. We've been having a lot of conversations about the value of the traditional interim reports and whether or not there is a more effective way to communicate academic progress to families that would be used in lieu of that, again, that traditional printed and mailed report that is out of date by the time that goes home. And so the DLT district leadership team is going to be meeting to talk about plans for, really defining what good best practice looks like for academic feedback. So that's an exciting conversation that will continue.
All right. Facilities.
Yep. Okay. Good, exciting. A lot of exciting things happening. So first of all, we listened to the presentation tonight, and flexibility came up, and I thought I would wait till we're talking about facilities. But speaking of flexibility, this continues to evolve, and one of the reasons it continues to evolve is because we have this amazing community that steps up to support the school district in so many ways. We're at the very front end of what could be another exciting opportunity. On March 21st, we had several representatives from the district, our architect, Mike Richley, Ron, Josh Stubenthal, Dean Kirshner, and I met with several members of the Wyoming Presbyterian Church. And they were reviewing their own facilities and the option of partnering with Wyoming City Schools for Elm. And so we're at the very front end of this.
Elm at the Presbyterian Church.
Yes. And so we're at
Get your head around that.
We're at the front end of that conversation.
We're gonna need
So-
a study.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on, I'm gonna go back.
I didn't have the heart to say it while you were talking. At least waited.
I love that you held that comment.
But would
But
you?
we're not.
Yeah, we're not there.
So we're at the front end, but we do think that there's an initial interest from the church, and I know it's been communicated to the congregation, and we're continuing to have what we're calling feasibility conversations. And so we'll be sending the team to the church to talk about many of the things that this presentation mentioned: technology, spaces, walkways, parking, security.
It's actually awesome to have those things identified.
That's right.
Instead of us trying to brainstorm them with the church,
That's right.
like we did in Friendship, and clearly forgetting some.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful.
But the space that we think may be available, would be space that we might not even have any need for modular units outside. But again, we're at the early end of the conversation, but we'll continue doing that. But again, a great opportunity in an amazing community.
Could you send an email to the committee to just update them that
Yes.
this conversation is beginning to take place?
Yes.
And whether or not it happens,
Yep.
it's too early to know,
Yep.
but,
Yep.
just so they have
Yep.
that knowledge.
Yep, absolutely.
Since none of them stayed.
Yep.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Come back. Watch the video, watch the video.
All right, so-
Send something out.
I-
Make
I-
sure they know how much we appreciate that work in our
Oh,
feasibility
yes.
planning.
Yes.
Make that first conversation so much faster.
That's all of those things, every single piece of that study is applicable to no matter where the space is. Because those are all things that we're able to walk through with our facilities core team and say, did we account for this? Is this present? What's missing? What can be improved upon, right?
We didn't sign the contract
So
yet.
very,
Nothing modulars.
Only the mods at Hilltop is all I've signed.
Right, because I was like, sorry, the modular guy was there. I mean, we've been having all these meetings. They're in there talking about what is
Only
specific.
signed it for the 2 mods at
Well, we
Hilltop.
don't have,
Uh-huh.
it's not said,
Okay,
so.
that's right.
so,
Yeah,
Thanks for the
another.
reminder.
Another big,
okay.
big step, is the sale of the Wyoming bonds. And Rhonda, if you're okay to speak to this a little bit, Rhonda, Jean and I traveled to New York. That was, a special day on March 13th to support the sale of the bonds for the primary facilities project. Fascinating process to me, which resulted in a great outcome. If you'd like to share just a little bit about that outcome.
Sure, as we're moving towards, all these key pieces of the construction project, it is important that we have the funds to pay for those pieces, so, it was time to issue the bond. I mean, we passed the bond issue in November and then, you might remember, issued some notes, $15 million in notes before the end of the calendar year in order to, one, start to contract with our architect, but also to have some advantage in arbitrage and gain some additional interest. But then work through the process. We talked a lot about the process in the board meetings. We had to get a credit rating update, and so we went through that process, and then we had to prepare the official statement that goes out, the offering that goes out to investors. And about a week to 10 days ahead of time, that offering document kind of hits the market. Our underwriters start to have conversations and market our bonds. And then it all happens in about a 3-hour window on a Thursday in New York. And just a wonderful process. We have a wonderful team. We work with RBC as our underwriter, and happy to report that we were oversubscribed. So we have a great credit rating, and it was wonderful to see local buyers actually purchasing our bonds. So Johnson Investments, Cincinnati Insurance, super fun to see a lot of individuals purchasing the bonds. We don't actually get to see their names, but it actually comes up as individuals. So that's a lot of fun and never happens, but it's kind of a Wyoming thing. So that was just really, really great that people here in Wyoming kind of wanted to have a little piece of history and bought some of the bonds. So when we were oversubscribed, that means that we got to bring down the interest rate a little bit. And so in the whole grand scheme of things, everything worked out perfectly according to plan, in alignment with, and we'll talk about that when I report on finance committee. We've been modeling the debt payments and the principal and interest schedule, and so all of that worked out perfectly. And we close on Thursday, so by Thursday afternoon, Jeannie signs all of those closing documents that are actually in front of her right now. We'll have all of our money in the bank, and that's exciting. Start to invest it, start to do all of this wonderful work that we've been planning for just a couple of years now, so it's great.
It's helpful to learn something new though, and you could say it again, I'm like, I don't fully get it, I think I get it, right? It's an interesting process.
Just look at this pile.
I know.
It's not one bond for 72 million.
Right.
They're all in packets and they come due at
Some
different
mature in
times.
December of 2025, and then there's a group of them that mature every December from now until 2049.
30,
42.
See, I gotta look at
I
my
thought it was
schedule.
37. Wait,
37 years plus now. 61, sorry, 61.
Yeah.
2049 is the middle school.
Yeah.
That's scheduled, yeah.
So people bought them for different reasons. too. Yeah, I made a big deal of that.
And I'll just, one other quick update is, just wanted to share, our most recent core team meeting is where our architect, our construction manager, our district, administrators and everyone closely connected to the work meets to talk about where we are in the process. Right now, it's all pre-construction. And one of the highlights from that meeting was feedback that was received, from the first design workshop. Behind you over there, you see the conceptual drawings that we had been working with. And it was exciting to see that the feedback that came from the first design workshop already has influenced the conceptual understanding of what this could look like. And so there have been changes made, which are powerful changes, I think. Excited to bring those out at the second design workshop. But that engagement process, now we see that happening, and it's bringing a positive result to the work, which is great.
And I hope we get that same kind of response when we have the Vermont and the Elm, that get people to come, because people came with incredible ideas.
Right.
It was great. Okay, and you meet this week?
Yes.
All right. Cool. Go for it, guys. Thank you. All right, and another big event was the finance committee met, because there's just so much going on right now.
So, take the whole thing?
Sure.
Yes,
I mean, then you-
Yep.
Thank you.
So we always review the salary benefit analytic, and so we talked about that. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about primary facilities, updating, just the overall budget, and then work through the details, as Tim mentioned, selling the bonds on March 13th, and then preparing for the closing date, which is on Thursday of this week. And, we actually worked through, the whole process from, sale dates on the 13th and working through the structure of the bond. So, we noted that there were some priced to mature in December of 2025, and then some priced to mature in 2061. And so, we worked through, reviewed that, and then also kind of rewound back to just when we started doing the planning, even when we were back to, working through the original millage and the $72.5 million project. And, brought all of that full circle to look at the actual structure now that we've sold them. And we looked at the principal and interest payments from 2025 all the way down to 2061. And then reviewed how the millage calculation works into that. So we looked at both the 2025 debt and the middle school debt from 2012. Just a reminder, we have refinanced that or refunded it most recently in 2017. And then we had some notes that were callable in 2023. And so we refunded those notes. The current law is that you can only refund things at the call date. And so we worked through the entire structure of our debt and reviewed all the principal and interest payments. Now that we have issued those bonds and know exactly what they are, and line those up against our expected millage, just to make sure that we are going to generate enough revenue in the bond retirement fund to make the principal and interest payments on the debt. So that was a good mathematical exercise. I think I enjoyed it the most of everyone else, but it was very fun.
Fun with finance.
Yeah, so fun. And then we moved on to maybe some things that aren't quite so fun. So we talked about the biennium budget update, just a reminder that the state budgets in 2-year biennium cycles. And so we're about to start a new biennium, 26-27. And as the state is preparing for their new budget effective July 1st, the governor has introduced his version of the budget. Step back and just talk about process for a second. The governor introduces a version, and that normally happens right around the beginning of February. And so the governor did that in early February. And then we've been reacting to that, reviewing it. I'll come back to how it's not great, but just let's talk about process. The governor has a version, then the House has a version, and that is happening. They're actually introducing theirs tomorrow around 1:30-ish, and then the Senate will have a version. And so sometime in May, all three of those versions will kind of get hashed out, and they'll send one version to conference committee that they'll further hash out, and then one version will go to the governor that he will then sign, and that will be the budget effective July 1st. So if this was an A to Z process, we are like on step B. The governor has introduced his version. It was not great for public schools. It was more not great for Wyoming city schools.
school funding in Ohio, we're under a formula now called the Fair School Funding Plan that was proposed a few years ago. It was phased in because at the time the state didn't have enough money to fully fund it. And so at this point, the governor's proposal stopped the phase in and also didn't provide some updates. So if you think about the school funding formula being a calculation, there are some inputs. And the input data is about average expenditure data that they kind of put in this calculation to generate funding. Well, those numbers are now old. And so we, it's sort of kind of common sense that you would update those numbers if you're gonna have a funding formula for future years. Well, that's not happening. And so the governor's formula doesn't use the updates and it stops the phase in. And so from a big picture Fair School Funding Plan, that's not great because it generates less money for public schools in Ohio. For districts like Wyoming, we were never a winner on the Fair School Funding Plan. We've been flatlined in state funding since 2019 at about $5.8, $5.9 million. And so we would not necessarily buy into the fact that it's a fair school funding plan. We kind of think it's an unfair school funding plan, but I've said for many years that our advocacy is going to be about eventually holding on to our state funding, and that really is where we are. Because so in the governor's proposal, he stops the phase in, doesn't increase the inputs into current year numbers, and then also phases down districts that are on the guarantee. So we're on the guarantee. And so he's phasing that down for districts like Wyoming. So I said all that, what that really means is that we are slated to lose about $850,000 in the governor's proposal. Now remember, we're on step B. This is an A to Z process. We're on step B. We only have the governor's proposal. The House has been hearing testimony, has submitted testimony on behalf of the districts, encouraging them to one, fund the plan from a big picture public school funding perspective. Two, increase the inputs because that's just sort of a common sense mathematical approach. And then also maintain the guarantees and find a way to generate additional revenue on the funding formula for districts like Wyoming, because we're not the only school district on the guarantee. And if you heard the governor's speech the day that he released his budget, he was talking about that he was assuming that districts on the guarantee are on it because they have had significant enrollment decline. Well, we look at enrollment as this board routinely, and we know that our enrollment is very stable. We've been, plus or minus 5% of 2,000 kids for many, many years. And when we do have enrollment fluctuations, it really is tied to our birth rate and our kindergarten number. And then you can watch those class sizes go through. Okay, and so we know that as we study our enrollment. Our place on the guarantee is driven by the components in the school funding formula that are related to property valuation and income. And we rank very high on both of those factors. And so that drives less money to Wyoming. That's why we're on the guarantee. And so his proposal is to further reduce that because he thinks that everybody on the guarantee is losing kids. Okay, so we've already identified a couple holes in the funding formula, right? And so if the budget were adopted today and tomorrow was July 1st, we would use the governor's plan and we would lose $850,000. This week, we will hear from the House. We don't know what the House is going to do, but they've been taking amendments from their members, and they will release theirs tomorrow afternoon. We're hearing that they don't have a big appetite for increasing the inputs and phasing in the formula. They're more inclined, or maybe they might pick one over the other. We haven't heard anything about the guarantee, so kind of our sources have been silent on what they think about the guarantee. But we won't know that until they release their version. At that same time, so over the next 2 weeks, the House is going to release their version and have some hearings. At the same time, the Senate is beginning its work. And so once we know what comes out of the House this week, then we can work together as a board, send some information out to our community, ask for some support and advocacy. It is important to us. We know that we are at the end of our levy cycle. We have passed an operating levy since 2017. And as we approach the end of our levy cycle, that means we have less flexibility. We're approaching our cash balance number that is meaningful. And so, losing $850,000 over the next biennium is not immaterial to us. It could very easily, and there's really three options. We go sooner, so you put a levy on the ballot sooner, in all likelihood maybe higher, more millage, or you make some reductions. So there, I mean, there's no magical math way out of this, you know, when you.
Reductions in expenditures.
Reductions in expenditures. So yeah, when you have depleting cash reserves, when you're at the end of your levy cycle, which we are, there are only really two options, raise revenue or decrease expenditures. And so ours could be some combination of both. And so, you know, we have been working towards a 2027 operating levy. We're working very hard to make that 2017 operating levy stretch as long as possible. And acknowledging that we just asked for bond millage. And so trying to, you know, put some distance in between bond millage and operating millage. So we've been working towards that. And so, you know, if this passed tomorrow and it was that $850,000, in all likelihood, we'd be talking about sooner, higher, maybe combined with some cuts. Like that would be the conversation, how those three things factor into a solution, okay? But I would like to not have to do that. So the alternative is we all just lobby like crazy and are super successful, but not just Wyoming City Schools, public schools in Ohio together, right? Because it's, you know, there's a lot that has to go right for Wyoming City Schools to keep our money and maybe see an increase. But for lots of other places around the state, you know, that it's way more of a dire situation. So it's going to be a super busy next couple weeks. So I guess my ask of folks, or if you're watching on the video, if you're here in the audience, pay attention. We will, in all likelihood, be asking some things of you, right? Call, email. We'll give you the tools that you need to be advocates, but it's important to us. It's important for public education in Ohio. And we had a guest speaker here tonight talk about the federal fund issue. We know that here in Wyoming, we get about $550,000 total federal funds. What we don't know is what that's going to look like after this year. We know what we have this year. We know what has happened at the federal level. We don't know exactly what that means for states. I don't think anybody does just yet. But that could add another layer into the complexity of what's happening.
And right now, all of that money that's coming from the federal government is designated for specific needs. The IDEA program, the title program.
Yeah, most of it, special education and students in poverty.
So what we do know is that any reduction of that goes immediately towards something that is very important to us.
Absolutely.
And
would have to be absorbed by the general fund, because there isn't another funding source.
Which is, and then the other thing, when we talk about cuts, we have to remember that 80% of our budget, of our revenue, goes to teacher salaries. So when you're cutting, it's obvious where you have to begin with cuts. You can't cut out one copy machine and say, okay, that'll do it, that'll.
And say it's like $850,000.
Right.
Yeah, that's not gonna help.
More like 10 teachers.
Yeah.
So in the last paragraph, you mentioned, this is what we have for this year. We don't know what's coming next year. I've not been watching every single day. Some of the direction.
Probably very healthy.
That's smart on your part.
Some of the direction that I've heard, as Jeannie talks about what that funding goes toward, the IDEA and or students in poverty, seems like the direction that we're not going to be supporting. It seems like what everything I've heard is pushing against funding those kinds of things. Is that accurate or not? I'm not trying to be dire, but just trying to get a sense for where we feel like it's headed based on what has been stated.
I have a sense, which it could be 100% meaningless, that if those federal funds get redirected to states, that there will still be a direction towards those two topics, special education, poverty. Do I think that we will get yet less? Yes. Because I think that those funds will be more directed to private schools. I mean, we've seen this road show before. And I think that what we're seeing in statewide education dollars being reduced for public education and redirected to other uses, I think that would continue when the federal money comes to us. My perception could be meaningless, but that's what we've seen happen. So will it go away? Probably not. Would it be less? My recommendation is yes, but I hope I'm wrong.
Well, and I think in light of our state legislature pushing funding of vouchers. You know, a lot of people I talk to will say things like, oh, isn't that for those in the, like, you know, the poorest districts or the, you know, you have to be at a certain level. And I'm like, no, all the guardrails are off. And just, tell me if I'm wrong, last year, state funding of vouchers grew to the tune of almost $8 billion, yet they say the level at which they're funding state education is not, state public education is not sustainable. And I really think this comes down to people need to pay it, there's a lot happening at the federal level, and there's a lot that is happening at the state level, that people, there's a lot of state legislation that impacts our budget, amongst other things. But 90% of Ohio's children are in public education. And Rhonda, I think you could probably give the figures pretty accurately. And this is not to speak against private schools, just the public funding of taxpayer dollars to privates. And in Wyoming, our student share, tell me if I'm wrong, would be about what, $2,900? Is that a per pupil? Per pupil?
3,000 is a fair rounding amount.
Okay,
3,000
so
is fair.
if there's a student in our district who's already attending private school, they can receive a voucher. Not in the amount, say they go to high school, that voucher, $8,400. So
And income phase down.
Yeah.
there, if you have a certain income,
Yeah.
it can be phased
Yeah.
down, but it's a pretty high level at which you can receive the total amount. And so to think about the small number of students in comparison to the number of students that our Ohio Constitution has said that, you know, these senators, Ohio, you know, House representatives take an oath to provide a common education for all. And it's part of our state constitution that they will do that. And redirecting that money to something that in effect becomes school operator choice versus parent choice, and that the schools still do not have to take any student that they choose not to. And they do not have the same accountability that public schools have. So I really do ask for people to pay attention at what's going on in our state legislature, because they have yet to hear voices.
And I do think that's part of the ask, sorry, but like, we realized we've talked about it so much, so I know way more about vouchers than I would have. And I'm talking to a lot of different people with kids in private and public, and they seem engaged in a lot of things, and they still aren't getting the complexity of how vouchers are working, because it's easily just, to a lot of the people, like, sign up for this.
Free money.
It's free money, so they don't understand the gravity, and I can understand why they don't understand it. So maybe part of the ask, I think it's great that you've given action steps, because I think we've all had a lot of people asking, like, how can we support you, or what can we do for the school? So at any point, when you are like, I think it's great to be able to reach out to people to say, whatever, maybe there's people who help explain.
I do think it's important in the context of House 196, which is the biennium budget. We need to be crystal clear on the ask regarding vouchers.
Yeah.
So Wyoming City Schools as a board has joined the lawsuit in opposition to vouchers.
Right.
Okay. Vouchers are in current law. And there is, I think, over 400 school districts now that have joined that lawsuit that is scheduled to go to trial in 2025. Okay. So that is happening. Vouchers are happening, and we joined the lawsuit. So put that over here for a second.
Yep.
Because, charging the state house in opposition to vouchers is not a path. Vouchers are here and they're happening, and so our path is through the lawsuit right now. Right. Our advocacy between now and July 1st is fund public schools in Ohio to a manner that is sufficient, and stop sending more money to vouchers.
Stop the expansion.
Stop the expansion. Yeah, I mean, vouchers they're there. And so, I'm gaining awareness and paying attention, 100% important, but like the voucher lawsuit is sort of a parallel thing. And I think it's easy for people to get confused and say, oh, what can I do to stop vouchers? Right, do nothing right now. The advocacy is fund public schools in Ohio first, fund the formula, increase the inputs, find a way to fund guarantees and provide for increases for school districts like Wyoming and stop voucher expansion. Don't say that you don't have the resources to fund public schools at the same time that you're increasing voucher spending.
Well, and I think that's.
And talking about tax
Tax
cuts,
increase.
those are very different things. And so, that's where I think our support of folks in their advocacy will be helpful.
Yes.
Because it is easy to get really riled up, and I am so guilty, because I am, I've been on my anti-voucher soapbox for many years. So it's very easy to get riled up in that, but the path right now is about the budgets.
I think too, though, it's really important for people to understand, because this has come quickly. There was a huge expansion in vouchers from one fiscal year, one biennium budget to the next, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars in 1 year, or millions of dollars, excuse me, in 1 year. And a lot of people are not up to speed on this. And so when you say you call or you email a senator, say fund public schools, or you go to a town hall meeting that may happen and you say fund public schools, and you have somebody like Matt Huffman say, well, I just don't know that's sustainable. It's important to understand as a citizen, the backdrop of why they say it's not sustainable, because of the mass amount of money going to this voucher expansion. So, I think a lot of people do not know where it started and where it's jumped to, and why that is such a threat to public education. But I agree, it is happening, is people just don't know.
Right.
The irony to me is we had a system of funding that was found unconstitutional 5 different times over 25, 30 years. And so Cup and Patterson came upon this new process. They worked bipartisan, worked it out, called it the Fair School Funding Plan. And it has turned out to be neither fair nor funded. Because in the meantime, a second group came in there and diverted that money. And it went from, I don't know, 400,000, wasn't it? To 1.1 billion over like a 2-year period. And this year they expect it to be 1.5 billion into schools that are not accountable. They don't have an audit. They don't test. They choose whomever they want. Their special needs program, they send the child back to the public school. We could go on too. Sorry.
Well, it was a lovely, fun conversation in finance committee.
Yes,
But
thank you.
one that is very important.
We had such a great time.
It's very important. The
got a lot
overall
of
message is
politics,
stay
people.
tuned.
Now we got more fun.
Yeah, now we have
a
more
direction
fun.
for you today, but we will have. it
Okay.
soon.
That'll be helpful.
Okay, unfortunately, things get dark again here, oh my goodness. We're ready to do policies. The Policy Review Committee did have a meeting with, Norm, our Neola representative, and, we have a series of policies that we have shared with you. There are some we need to talk about, so I think the way to do this maybe is jump in, please, if you have a question, and Ilya, Rhonda, and Tim, I need you to jump in whenever you can, please, to help me out. So here we go. Policy, sorry, let me get up to where I actually am. Policy 0131.1 is a revised bylaw. It deals with technical connections. It updates names and it's, I guess, as Norm likes to call it, wordsmithing. It's I don't believe there is much discussion other than it exists here, and I think it's okay for us to move on that one. Okay, the next policy is, sorry, 0171 is called review of policy, and because there's a new policy coming up, 0131.1. This one is actually, you could draw a line through it. This is one that we've slated to remove. And then the next one on my list is 1422.01, a drug-free workplace. And this would have, this would be similar to 3122 and 4122. Remember the policies, the ones that would apply to administrators are in one section, the one that applies to students in another, the one that applies to teachers in yet another, even though they can end up being the same policy, triplicated. Is there anything anybody wants to say on this one? This just brought that into solid form for, in this case, for administrators.
So it's basically the same thing that's written that we have already in other areas.
Yes. Now-
It is a very minor detail, but affected by drugs. I mean, do you wanna say illegal or? I guess that
I know,
is.
we did not talk about that. You're right. We mean by affected by illegal drugs.
It's not tainted by the use or evidence of use of any controlled substance. Is that this?
That would include a lot of, prescribed medication.
Yeah, like, I feel like we need to somehow work in the word illegal. Or, I mean, that may be stating the obvious, but some people have to use controlled substances.
Sure.
I don't know.
This is the first of a 30-day read, first read of 30 days, sorry. So there's no reason why we cannot, as a committee, we'll go back and take a look at that.
Yeah.
It's minor, but.
One of it says any controlled substance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, go ahead.
and then it adds drug paraphernalia, so if you have to use a needle during the day to administer your medication, make sure that by
Yeah,
itself should be.
Right.
The only form of paraphernalia.
Okay, thank you. All right.
A little broad, I guess, is what.
We'll
needs to
capture
show.
these questions that we need to come back to and
I am trying to as well, but if
Yeah,
we could
let's
all
all
do
try,
that,
yeah.
please.
I agree.
All right, the next one is 2260.02, and this talks about single gender classes and activities. Would somebody else like to talk about that? Because I wasn't quite sure why we needed it.
Well, I underlined the line in this policy that says that it delineates the circumstances permitting administrators to create single gender educational offerings. And lists some examples. Cause it's not general that you would do that.
You could have a woman's choir,
Contact sports, right.
you know, or you could have a tag team football, tag football for boys,
Mhm, mhm.
as opposed
There-
to.
Yeah, there's some allowable reasons for that.
Right, but you're
to
allowed to do it,
happen.
but you don't have to, because you're right. At
No,
first I
you
was
don't
like,
have to.
yeah, I know, but when that first came.
You don't have to, but you have that option. If, for instance, you wanted to have, I'm sorry, I'm not the sports person, you will know that, but I am the forest person. If you wanted to have an all-female triple trio or something, you
Right.
can do so.
Yes.
Well,
Several examples in physical
yeah,
education
you
class.
can't, they're normally saying you can't separate them, like
Right.
it's not our policy to separate them, unless you wanna do that for wrestling, rugby.
Right.
Right, it's saying, here are the reasons why you can,
Right.
and you can group them by ability, or if you wanna divide them for human sexuality classes,
Right.
If you identify.
Or if you wanna
as different
sing.
gender, they can
Right.
do
the
that.
women with the men.
Right.
So it sort of delineates when it's okay, but generally, we shouldn't be separating the girls and the boys and instructing them separately.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're just clarifying.
Or-
Yeah, there's a lot of
Or
different things.
participating
I
in
just
sports.
wanna.
I don't know
The
what
first
the
one is sports.
intention
Sure,
with this
that.
one is, but I guess
Good
it.
for a hidden meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, surreptitiously, inserted here.
I'll be honest, I mean, I just
Oh,
kind of assumed when
absolutely.
it came across, I was like, is something nefarious about it, or is it really just trying to be protective, an actual protective of?
I think this one is meant to be protective.
I
I'm
think
just gonna
as it's written,
Yeah.
it's meant to be
Yeah, I
protective.
can't, I mean.
All
I
right, we're just gonna be,
Yeah.
I do too.
okay.
All right,
So
don't worry.
somebody
we'll
wanted,
have
if somebody
somebody-
wanted to, if
Thanks,
they said, hey, we wanna have like the men's engineering class over here, no, you can't do that.
That's right.
You gotta have the men and the women in the engineering class.
Right,
That's
right,
right.
right, okay.
So it
Yeah,
delineates,
that's really its
it
purpose.
delineates when you can do it.
Wait,
Right.
Yeah, because
No,
it
but
specifically, it
wait a minute.
specifically says when you can, when you
Okay.
Can. These are the reasons when you
Well, like-
can do it.
My daughter, engineering school at Michigan State, they have women in coding, women in engineering. Can we not have?
We have those clubs. We had a women in engineering club at the middle school, didn't we?
We have,
Yes.
Yeah, we have before.
and we can still do that.
And we can still, that's.
Yeah, this is about courses.
Or activities.
It's saying you can do that,
No.
cannot.
Generally not.
You can offer single-gender classes or programs when needed to achieve an important objective. And the single-gender nature of the class or program is substantially related to that objective.
Can you
If
do a
someone
women in
identi-
coding to encourage women in to do coding?
I think underneath, so down underneath A, B, C, D, it talks about what you can do in classes or programs to achieve two important objectives. And those are improving achievement and providing diverse educational opportunities or meeting a particular identified educational need. It seemed like that language.
Right.
I think we have to say yes, even though we feel like
As
we're
long as
hearing
there's
no
room
in
for
the outside
that,
world.
you know,
No,
And it's-
no, no.
It's a good one, it's actually a good one, Matt.
It's-
And I just wanna make sure
Do
it's
you
not
want this
excluding
reviewed?
someone who identifies female, but we're doing over, you know, like, I just, all the things that we're trying to do.
Are we, we're not making a note to review, okay?
I think it was just clarifying that it was really.
And we hope that that's a
And not
clarification.
masked as something.
All right, 2271 is about College Credit Plus, the College Credit Plus program. It is to line up with, SB 104. It's a revision of, what we already have in place. And I think there are some date changes about when a parent can notify the school district that their child will be taking a CCP program class.
Yep.
And other than that, that one's kind of the way it is. Oh, boy. Now we have 2340.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
I do have a question about this one.
Go back to that. Okay, got it.
And again, because this is my only chance, I'm not on the policy committee, so I'm sorry to.
No,
have time,
that's what
but,
this is all for.
So we have to include a home educated student. And how do we, and have we traditionally, and I'm just not aware, how do we evaluate their qualifications to participate? Because it says here, a student, this is new language, including a home educated student. Or the student's parent must complete and submit the letter of intent to participate in College Credit Plus program to the principal, which signifies the student's interest to participate. They must participate in counseling sessions.
Oh, you're on the home student section?
Yeah, it's enrollment.
This is the steps that they have to fulfill by November and then by April to participate in CCP.
Okay, how do we evaluate a home educated student? I guess that's my question. Have we traditionally done that? And I just didn't know.
I think we changed the policy for home educated last year, right? Some of
They
the
have to
They have to notify. They have
Oh,
to
that's right, it was
complete
much more minimal,
right.
like they minimized
They don't have to share
qualifications.
necessarily specific plans, it's just notifying the district.
Right, but I see what you're saying, and they don't have a lot of criteria if you're
Yeah.
homeschooling.
But in the Form 2271, either a home educated student or a student in our district would have to fill that out and go through whatever the process is. And so I don't know if we do an evaluation of the home educated student at all, as much as the school they're going to take the class from.
For CCP.
Is there any added work for us?
These are deadlines, I think, imposed on parents, and they're just in that parenthetical section where they mention students, home-based students. It just is including them in the general population of our in-class students or in-school students, I think.
So the principal's not doing the evaluation.
Just receives it, maybe, just has to receive the paperwork.
And pass it on. I think the evaluation takes place in that you have to be accepted in that university.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other big change at the end, the general requirements talks about paperwork, and that we shall, we have to use the forms, the CCP forms as developed by the chancellor and the department without
Right.
any modification. We've been doing that, we don't change that, we haven't been making up our own or anything like that, so that doesn't change our course of action, in the least.
But you have to assume that other school districts were for them to fill that.
Somebody,
out.
yeah.
Somebody was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All it takes one.
Yeah.
And just in case you're wondering, we are audited on this. They ask for a presentation and they ask for our materials and they verify that they match. The auditors ask for it.
For
Something
the,
that likely does not happen at a private school.
They don't trust us.
for the students we're sending to CC.
Or they're required that we have the meeting and the timeline, the materials, they pull a sample. We are audited of all of these state requirements as part of our financial audit. We pull all of this information.
All right, 2340 is field and other district-sponsored trips.
Thank you.
Sounds easy. Sounds easy, doesn't it? So that one's okay, right? This one, I think some of the concerns were, I mean, some of it, obviously is just the things that we already do these things. We've got most of this in place. And, they talk about the new line they put in there. I'm sorry, do I have to actually read this? In accordance with state law, members of the opposite biological sex are prohibited from sharing overnight accommodation. And so one has to have some kind of plan in place, which we do, correct?
Yes.
And for students who might be in a gender changing situation. Is that the best way to say that? Sorry, I need.
Have we traditionally used this phrase opposite biological sex?
No.
Treating things as
No.
binary and dualistic as opposed to. And this comes up later in another policy, and it's, as far as I can see, and maybe I just didn't see it, it's not defined. And we use a fairly substantial term here, it's not defined in the policy of what we mean by opposite biological sex. So I would table, or put this aside for future consideration, at least.
I'm curious, like what
Yeah.
high school or middle school leaders have used referring to. I mean, the term of opposite sex is not something that's, I'm not engaged with it as unusual or even biased in the discussion around non-binary, this brings a lot of question on how do you manage, so I'd be very curious, how do they determine, make decisions relative to who stays in the rooms, kind of where. I was actually interested, the irony to me about this is different in that this was designed in theory so that the school could protect and make sure that stuff isn't happening, in the rooms overnight. Even though I don't know what we do for people who are in a same-sex relationship with someone who's on a trip at high school, which is a totally different can of worms. I'm not trying to open that today. That's one of the things that was just ironic to me, as we think about all this protection, that we're doing and how do we manage it well. So.
Well, and I don't, I think it's a good question as to the language in the policy, because I'm not sure of the language in the law. And so the law changed February 25th. And the policy is there to reflect the law. And I'm not sure what the actual language is in the law, so I think it's good to look at. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about, like you said, opposite sex. We don't use that specific term.
Well, and it's even the
Opposite biological.
opposite biological
It
sex.
feels,
I thought that was the
it's,
yeah.
yeah, that is very.
Right. Well, and part of the research that I'm trying to do on many of these too is to find out, is a policy in and of itself legally required? And then to the next level, the language of the policy that we want to have in place. I don't know that this policy is necessarily legally required, important to continue to check into. I think the intention of it is to make sure that our district staff is aware of the law. So I think that's probably the intent of it, but I think it's important to continue to look at it, yes.
It's pretty specifically stated, so I
Yes.
would like to
Yeah.
send this one back to.
All right.
And just to continue that point, just to make sure everyone is aware of this process, during a first read, this is the intent of a first read. We can talk about these things, and if we're moving forward on a second read to approve certain policies, we can do that as a second read, and ones that we're pulling off for more discussion, we can do that.
Okay.
We'll be mindful to any dates by which anything has to be approved, so I'll just continue to monitor that.
Okay, because some of these are April, it looks like.
Some of
very
them,
early
well,
April,
some of them, along, like, there's one of them that we'll probably talk about where a law changes, in April. And then a policy has to be approved in July.
Oh,
So
okay, I
along
was
those
making the
25,
point.
right.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
All right, the next one is 2430.02, participation of community STEM school students in extracurricular activities. This ties itself up with HB 47. That long line, those are both homeschool children and children who attend, voucher schools. I think I'm gonna just put it all into one big pot. I don't know that, I don't. If there's the new section that's in here, it just reflects the law change, and I'm not sure. This one was a hard one for me because I don't think it hooks up with us. I don't, we haven't had.
The part about the
this one.
bullying,
And then there's the bullying, part. Yeah. we should talk about that. Yeah.
oh, there, it's like, yeah, it's middle 2, 4, and 6 lines down.
Yeah, if it's,
That's an temptation of bullying. So can I have an example? How do you all, do you have an opinion about this policy? Like, or change in the policy? Because I guess this was a policy from 2017. So it's been a while that I think we've had where students were either homeschooled or like in another school to participate.
it's hard to hook it up to us, yeah.
We don't have a ton of these examples. I think that if you look at the very last sentence in there, it says the district will not penalize or restrict the eligibility of a student who moves into, say, our district because they've moved from somewhere else due to bullying. So I think the big picture around making our athletics and other stuff available to homeschool students is one piece. But I felt like some of this revision is to say that if someone was participating in Princeton district sports or interscholastic stuff and had a bullying situation, they would be able to come to Wyoming, and if we offered that to them, they wouldn't experience a penalty, meaning having to sit out or be subject to the other transfer rules that a student is subject to because the move was driven by bullying, is what I took away.
But then I was having a problem in that we are a closed district. So we don't have transfers.
Right,
The way
it
that
doesn't
says
say
the
shall.
superintendent may.
Right, it doesn't,
Yes.
I think that's the
Yes.
biggest
Yeah.
delineation, and I don't think that that's typical, in our conversation. I think we had shared that this is really not common practice, and that's the biggest point, since it's may, not shall.
Right,
Right.
right, that's right.
So we can stay for that reason, but on the other hand, is this a necessary policy for us to have? We're not a transfer kind of district.
Is it applicable? Yeah, like,
I just couldn't, you can tell.
But it
I
is in the
can't
sense
find
of
it.
home educated, you do have home educated students here.
Yes, okay, that is true.
So in that
Yes.
regard,
It
that
doesn't
is
happen a
happening.
ton, but it's something that happens. And so the idea of him, the superintendent may, that sort of creates the flexibility to determine.
and I don't know either, I'm just saying, like, that's my question, but we definitely are, you do have some of some students here.
But home educated
Yeah.
who've been bullied,
Like,
Yeah.
I think they're
outside
separate,
the district.
it's confusing, I think, because they're putting, to me, it's like.
They say you're home educated, but you live in Glendale. Did you come to Wyoming and say, well, I'm home educated, I would like to participate in your sports?
Yes, I think you can say that and Tim can say
You could
no.
request that,
No.
right.
Okay.
Or if you're if you're in another school district, it says in the qualifying
I
school
think it's
district or
confusing
different
for all
school
of us to
district.
read.
So we could have
Bring
our
the whole
own
process.
school student, it could be somebody from another
Yeah.
district that
It's
says,
covering all the.
I'm sorry?
That's what I
Well,
thought, that's why I
yeah.
was reading it, I think that's why it was
I have to go
confusing to
back
all of our
to
brains.
see,
It creates open
All right.
how
enrollment
that's
for extra.
different from.
It
I feel like
does.
it
But it
opens a
hinges
little
here.
bit, it
Hinges
opens
on-
the
No.
door.
I think if the student has had one of these experiences.
Exactly.
Sure,
If it's
sure.
driven because of bullying.
Yeah.
Right.
Some kids
Or-
transfer just because they want to play for a different basketball
Not just
team
because.
or play for a different
Right,
coach.
yeah.
Yeah,
Penalty.
so what's your
It
criteria
has-
for bullying? Like, I mean,
99
I guess that
districts don't do it.
isn't something that has to be addressed in the
No.
policy, but.
Don't practice that.
Practice it, yeah.
I feel like you just have to trust him. to
Yeah.
Work with the
Yeah.
other district and say, tell me about the harassment, intimidation,
Right.
bullying, or, if there was an adult who was charged, indicted, convicted, or pled guilty,
Right,
then this child has come. I mean, that's all the language in the policy.
Yeah.
The student has come to us from this circumstance.
and therefore you could say.
And then
yes.
Tim could say yes.
When I think some of it
That
for
was
us,
the
or like when
situation.
we're not on it, it's making sure you guys feel okay with some of these, because you're the ones, really in charge of some
I
of
mean,
this.
they're all tricky. I mean,
Yeah.
the stuff that just happens every day doesn't need to be in a policy, right?
Yeah, there's only a policy because it's tricky.
and they
And
become.
that's
Right, right, because there's been an
Or
issue
to
somewhere.
reinforce.
And this
Yeah.
group,
Yeah.
this particular group is trickier than usual.
Yeah.
Well, and we're clearly being extra cautious.
Okay,
then you are doing that too.
That is
Aware.
correct.
No, but also like,
A few hours.
just the language, this, I mean, the May is fun. But, they're using one thing to be able to include something else. A student in another district who's being bullied, we all say, oh, yeah. But a home educated student in another, from anywhere. That, there's no requirement that they have been bullied. I
How's it
mean,
different for a home educated student versus a student in another district as you read this policy?
I read the policy may grant any home educated student or any student enrolled in a qualifying school or a different school district,
Right, any student.
regardless of whether the superintendent's district is the student's resident district, the opportunity to participate in athletics at a school in the district.
If the student
I
is
guess if
subjected-
there's, I guess a home educated student.
Well,
If the
I'm
student was
saying-
subject to any of the,
I just read it as any student. It doesn't have the parentheses on this one, but it says any student, whether that was home educated, a student who is in a district that's ours, living here or not living here. The superintendent may allow that person to participate in our interscholastics without penalty.
Yep.
If in fact, some of these things are.
That's right.
Right,
That-
and you
So,
would- yeah.
so regardless of where,
Yeah.
where the student is, they would have had to be
Yeah.
subject to one of those.
Right.
one of those
And then it's
right.
up to you.
Participate here without
Right.
penalty.
Right, and then you have them.
And I can't get past the fact that it's a closed district. And we don't do transfers.
We say don't do transfers. I mean, there are people who
Let's-
transfer into our district.
I think there's
But they
enough,
live here.
I think
Yes.
there's enough questions about this to just get some.
All right,
further detail.
yeah, it's marked.
Because I think one of the things that might be different is, I'm looking for language on what portion of the, and that's OHSA rules, what portion of the season can a child participate in? Because that's been historically part of the equation too, but I don't see that, so I want,
I'm
I
just
want
not
to check it.
sure what the, again, what they're trying to address with this
Right,
and what it opens the door to. What the precedent is being set.
So if a student, I have a friend's child was in Winton Woods District last year and moved to Woodward School this year. because they wanted to transfer and change the basketball team they were playing. So that student is able to play for 11 games of the season, but not the second half of the season. Because they're trying to discourage people from leaving one school to go to another one just so that they can win championships. So they allow you to play in the first half of the season, but not the second half. That's a penalty that's put in place in a space where that transfer happens when it's perceived the transfer is happening for the purpose of something in that space. So part of it, in terms of the bullying and all that, I think it's intended to create a criteria around when or why that would be acceptable to transfer, and that student will be able to participate without penalty. Our district is not in an open, kind of district like in Princeton or something like that, so it doesn't happen here very often. But I think that's some of what the language is intended to communicate, which is why at the bottom of the green portion, they cannot be penalized if in fact the move is driven because of some of those.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's right for us, doesn't mean we need it, et cetera, but that's what I think it's designed to.
Very specific around bullying. Right. So it's not enrolling into our academics.
Right.
No, it would be because of extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
That would, I would believe, need to be documented, and then the superintendent would
And that's
need
not
to be
new,
able to.
right.
Okay.
All right, we will look at that again, but I think we're coming in on the meaning of it. The next one is 2431, interscholastic athletics. This is another one that hooks itself to HB 47, and it requires a mandatory meeting. It requires no student may practice or compete in interscholastic athletics until the student submits a form signed by the student's parent or guardian, affirming that each has received a sudden cardiac arrest, so it's a concussion, head injury information. In other words, it's the whole process of if a health event takes place, there has to be a process for how we deal with it, how the student is notified, how the school is notified. Prior to the start of each athletic season, each school operated by the district that offers athletic programs shall hold an informational meeting for the students and the parents to talk about what our processes are. It will also include physicians, pediatric cardiologists, athletic trainers, and any other individuals who participate in athletic programs.
A lot of the middle language is the same as the one we just reviewed, so it
Right.
feels like if that one is something we need to take a look at, this would be something we need to.
Well, the first part of this one is regarding mandatory information meeting, is the big change.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Adding,
well
adding,
specified adding
setting,
cardiac
cardiac
You're
arrest.
adding the
That's
cardiac.
really the big highlight on this one, is adding that to the,
Okay.
to the training.
You know, I was curious about this, not to split too many hairs here, but it says that in both these sections, the one we just discussed and this current one, that the superintendent will document the reasons for granting participation under this policy. It doesn't say any requirement if you were gonna deny it, exercising your discretion as to why, but then it goes all the way down at the bottom that you are not permitted, as a school district and presumably as a superintendent, to deny based on participation in College Credit Plus. So it does create some limitation. You couldn't use that. It's just what's required to be documented is kind of appears to be a one-way street, only if you're granting permission, not if you are denying it.
So my question, because these are both HP 47s, should we look at one while we're looking at the other, or?
The language is the same. I think you're clarifying the language for one of them.
Okay.
I'll mark this one down as a clarifying language.
I was thinking the same thing.
All right. Okay, next one on the list is 2460, and this is a special education. This is a revised policy. It is, looking at this one over here, 20.
It seems mostly semantics.
I believe it is. It's, the operating standards is required, and it has some wordsmithing,
Right,
as Norm likes to say.
and we,
So, right,
and every year we'll be sharing the model policy. for special education. And we did that before this,
Yeah.
this policy was written, and so that's really why the changes.
Right, there's no.
It
real
depends on whether or
content.
not you already approved that or hadn't approved that yet.
But you're right, it hasn't been changed since 2016.
And the one that came before that, the one that for which we were making the changes, then therefore we were going to, rescind, pull out of our policies. So that's the other part of 2460.
Yes.
All right, 5113 is inter-district open enrollment, and this is tied to SB 208. This one, the story behind this that we received was that if you live near a military institution, Rice Pack was the example that was always given to us. This was written more for those students who are in school districts around a place where one or even both their parents could be on foreign assignments, could be out of the.
Well, I think
Am I getting this right?
I think it's actually meant for everyone, but the districts that it will impact are the ones that are close to military bases, right?
We have some questions
Mhm.
if we were. Okay.
Well, and I did not ask, I did not research this one, but I do believe that it does have to be. included, But we can check that.
I was just saying, if we had to keep it, if it's one that we have to have, then I
Oh,
definitely have some questions and conversation about it. If it was gonna start and say, we don't even need it, then let's not
Yeah.
waste time. I'm curious then if the wording, so I mean, can we talk about being offensive and confusing and by the time you get to racial balance and racially isolated building and maintaining appropriate racial balance just makes me feel so upset that, like, I get it, I like the other bit of enrolling a military family.
Yeah,
That
and that's
feels
what I was
great,
speaking
like,
to.
right, that part of it feels great, so why,
Plugged in here.
like, what?
Permits a student who is not a native student of the district to open enroll in the district if the student's parent is an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States who is stationed in Ohio and who provides the district a copy of the parent's official written order verifying that parent's status as an active duty member of the armed forces.
Right, I'm not mad.
Additionally, the bill permits a student enrolled under a district's open enrollment policy exception. Remember, we don't have open enrollment. To continue to attend that district and receive transportation services for the remainder of the school year if the student's parent is discharged or even released from that active duty assignment. The new military exception must be added to policies for districts that either entirely prohibit inter-district open enrollment or only permit it for adjacent district students. So that actually is us, the new military exception, because we prohibit inter-district open enrollment.
That part is fine, it's just the bits within the bits.
You're talking internal.
It also
Thank
has,
you, the bits.
Well, and also.
I'm talking about, I understand the overarching policy.
okay,
That part's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't clear about that. That part, accepting military families, I do not have a problem with that. When you get down to the language,
The emphasis on the definitions.
On the-
Why there's so much emphasis on racial.
why
And
are
that
you,
is,
why is there an entire part on racial balance and then racially isolated building and then maintaining appropriate racial balance? As it kept going, I am like, I can't stand my word. If we had to have this policy, do we have flexibility in eliminating some language, or is it, just what?
we had
You know,
already opted to take option 1 at the beginning of the policy and not do option 2 or option 3.
I don't see the options on.
Okay, then
So
maybe,
maybe I clicked the wrong.
would Missy have taken those 2 out?
Yeah, we don't get to.
I don't
see
see an
that.
option.
We're not,
So I'm
we're
just
not on
seeing-
the committee,
We
we're.
only include the one, what we chose.
So I'm seeing
Perfect, I should be,
things that I
I should
just
be
like
doing that.
I
as
think
an
this
option.
policy is required.
I do believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta
I do
review a
think so.
policy every year.
And this, the language, that language goes back to 2008, which was the last time that it was.
And I think
it
it
was
means
adopted.
that when we admit people, we cannot put we can't segregate our schools.
That's right. That's
We
right.
can't-
That's the intention of it.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
even
it just-
thinking about internal, what is it, intra, district open enrollment, where you're looking and this question comes up. You want to change from one building to another in our primary grades.
So if
And those
it-
are factors for consideration.
Well, you're maybe feel better, but okay. When I read racial balance, it says racial refers to minorities classified as African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, or Native American students. Balance refers to the percentage of racial students in a district program, classroom, or school. So if you're saying it really means you just can't segregate, that's fine, but to me it reads, if you're getting a school that's getting a little too black or brown, it reads really gross to me. And so I just wanna make
Like
sure.
that was something you could take into consideration.
I didn't think it was something you could take into consideration whether you accepted those students or not. So you couldn't reject them because you, in your district, had too many of a certain
Okay.
kind. But say for us with 3 elementaries,
Yeah.
if we were to bring them into the district and Elm or Vermont was meaningfully different relative to the percentage, that the superintendent of the district has the ability to balance or make some decision about where a student is enrolled in our elementaries with balance, with racial balance as a consideration. Which meant you couldn't put all the black or brown kids, in Vermont. But that you also wouldn't have to respond to someone somewhere else saying, we don't want Indigenous kids. You would have the option to sort of provide that racial balance according to the district, because it says it couldn't be meaningfully different than what's present in the district. That's what I read.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
You're helping me
and as
with
compared to the
something.
overall population of the.
Yeah,
of the
the
school.
overall
Yes,
population.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think it's written with the intention of the flip side of that, right?
It is. I'm
Yes.
jumping to dark. I'm just,
No, no, I don't think
like,
it is.
everything
I
I'm
think
reading
it's-
now,
I
I'm
think it's
jumping to
positive.
like, it
And you
is.
see
I think
that,
it is.
thing,
I've
yeah.
read it.
I read
just
it,
like
I read it like,
she
I was
did,
very
because
upset.
of where it is put in the military family. I guess.
Okay, well, you all are helping me.
But per the pervading thinking, there's not that many black or brown people in the military anyway, so it's really not a problem. Of the thinking that you're thinking about coming from a dark place, people who think that way don't actually think that a good percentage of military people are black or brown, so they wouldn't write this policy in that way.
So you're telling me it's
Really.
not.
All right, but I'm
Okay.
I'm pulling it out to review anyway.
I like
Okay, since we're on the
You just wanna review them
conversation,
all?
since we're on the conversation,
Yeah.
there's a line in here, and the green means new language.
Correct.
Yeah.
The whole thing feels new.
Well, it's-
Therefore, I'm like, I don't know
It
what was
says
there in
this-
06. There's like 4 words in it.
I really wanna know what this means and what you all think of it. The superintendent shall then, okay, wait, make appropriate recommendations if it looks like things are unbalanced. It should be noted that as of April 21st, 2025, there are no racially isolated buildings within the school district.
That's HB.
Where are you there on here, Kara?
Right here.
Maintaining appropriate racial balance, the last sentence.
Second
Oh, I see.
paragraph
Yeah, second paragraph, last
of
sentence.
maintaining.
All right, as long
What
as,
does that
as long as
mean?
you guys
Should
tell me. it's-
concern arise regarding racial balance in one or more of the schools, the superintendent shall consult with legal counsel to determine the appropriate steps that should be taken, including but not limited to any necessary policy revisions and other actions necessary to comply with state and federal law. That in itself is good, but anyway, the superintendent shall make appropriate recommendations to the board. It should be noted, April 21, 2025 is when some law takes place,
It also relates
It's
to
in
the
my
last
head,
paragraph,
not the
in
name
terms
of the
of the
law.
obligation of the superintendent to review annually the level of diversity and also the racial balance. So I think that marks like the anniversary date is what they're putting in. Because the obligation at the end requires an annual review. But I agree, it's an odd thing to put in a policy, because we'll have to change this every year.
Well, that's true. All right,
I've written this one in.
we're gonna actually need to talk about that
I guess.
2025.
Are there any or not? Okay, let's keep this moving. We're not even half.
I don't know, I don't have any other notes than.
All right, well, you
So
guys
we
gave me a
will-
different perspective though, and I appreciate that because I
Oh.
just said, yeah, you could either look at it really poorly or it's written for good.
We will take that one into, we'll go back to the drawing board on that one.
It all,
Easy answer.
okay, this
All right.
might not be something that impacts our district greatly, but I'm just thinking of an end game where, you have a lot of districts where lots of students are leaving. And then you might have a district where things become unbalanced. And is that a reason to close a school or, find a school that's not complying in some way? I don't, but that's not really something that I see impacting us
Right.
directly, so.
The other thing, I love the energy, honestly, about us thinking about districts beyond just ourselves. 'Cause,
Yeah,
honestly, some of the discussion we have today about us being under attack, as a district strikes me interestingly because much of public education has been under attack since we based it on taxes, from the beginning. The question I have with what you're saying is, in the scenario of the thing you're concerned about, what are you envisioning connected to the policy relative to military kids and that kind of thing?
the military piece now, the fact that they inserted this piece in there, knowing that this is for the video, but, considering that vouchers, I attended a League of Women Voters put on a information session. They had someone from the, is it Cleveland Heights area? And she was talking about her district. She's a superintendent there. And she said the vouchers have dropped the percentage of white students in their school from like 30% to 3%. Whoosh. Then you're left with these schools that say had a fairly diverse, now look like they're isolating. I guess I'm just thinking chess moves, like down the line.
Yeah.
Like you, especially after talking to Andrew Brenner, who said all these failing schools, close them down, the free market should shut them down. You look at this, putting language in that then gives whoever comes into power the opportunity to go, well, look what, we're just gonna have to.
Shut that school down or something. Well, that's a very important, I read the tea leaves and, my mother would say, just because I'm a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean you're not out to get me. And I'm not saying what you're saying. I think there is a connection between the vouchers and this dynamic. I mean, and we're, in a safe space, even on the how, because I think part of the voucher strategy is to continue pulling affluent-ish white students out of public schools so that they do fail. And so that then when you describe the school that's failing, then you have the opportunity to privatize or do whatever, as is being discussed about a number of other things from the post office to everything else. So like when you take the staffing out and it begins to underperform, then you say it's broken, now we have to fix it. My friends are the ones who can fix it because they've got a business set up to go run that. Let's have our friends run that thing. So I don't disagree that that's a 4-step down the road potentiality for what the driver is in the policies, et cetera. And I think that's the reason why the voucher discussion is being sued. I think we have to try to advocate against that and manage, how we protect public schools. But I don't think it's untrue what you're concerned about.
And listening to the superintendent from that district. And she said, talked about also this continued language, since the report cards of a failing school, psychological effect it has on the teachers and students in that district. And then on the local community, even after they work and improve and are no longer a failing district, the politicians still keep talking about that failing district. Therefore, they can't pass a local levy. So again, this isn't necessarily something that impacts Wyoming right now, but it's something, again, to pay attention to in Ohio, I think, and, I don't like being a part of creating such language that may have benefit down the road for those kind of endeavors.
The other thing, this policy, I think, illustrates a need for, in a lot of these cases, if this is a mandatory policy that we're obligated to adopt, the way the law is written, and I think it is, given the mandatory language at the bottom, that we could perhaps at the outset of these policies state that. For example, the second sentence of the policy, all the way at the top, it says, however, the district shall accept open enrollment. That really does make it sound like we as a district have made the decision to do this, when in fact, we're only doing this because we're being mandated to do it from the state, right? So just for anybody reading this, like in isolation or on its own, might look at us and say, what are you guys thinking? Why did you come up with this policy? We're just following mandatory requirements from the law. So something to the effect, however, as required or as mandated by the state legislature, by the state of Ohio, however you want to characterize it, the district, will accept or has to accept. To just give agency to the source of this policy. It is not of our own making, even if we're 100% on board with it. If we did not give birth to this, right? And so just letting people know why it is we're doing what we may end up doing.
And I think also that helps educate the public as to what local control really is and what it doesn't. And
yeah,
I don't think it hurts to be clear about it in some way.
This is an unfunded mandate. Even if it's a good idea, even if it's the right thing to do, the fact that these students that would come into our district or any other district are not obligated to pay tuition like we require of our or of our teachers and staff that live outside the district. We're not getting any extra money other than perhaps what the state would provide just as a per pupil kind of basis. And so very clearly, this is something that people on certain sides of the aisle complained of for years about unfunded mandates. This is that.
But it's for the military,
Unfunded mandate,
so it's okay.
unfunded mandate, yes.
Yes.
Got it down.
At times.
We'll have some chats.
In the era where special consideration and privilege is being deemed inappropriate.
Yeah.
Or not merit-based.
Yeah.
This is okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going on to 5120. Assignment within a district. This is an update and, I'm not sure I got all of the options that we chose, but in most cases, basically this just updates, how we assign our children within our district is literally what it is, correct? Is there any, we just, I don't think we had any problems with any of the language here. All right.
It does include some of the language from the previous policy. Or wait, no.
No.
Does it?
No.
No, I don't
It
think
was
so.
not
Just
selected.
clarify the language around opportunity to achieve
That's right.
education.
Yep.
Okay, 5131 is, student transfers. And this is a policy that is hooked to HB 147. The changes are happening in this revision, because of provisions, that were incorrectly applied in previous times or some such thing. So, that one I don't think has any red flags. There's a lot of red with it we pulled off, but, oh wait, you can't see that, so you're not looking at
Yeah,
that.
right, I think that's why I think we're rejecting this one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wait, we're rejecting it?
All crossed.
It's all red.
Wait.
Rejected.
Which one were?
I thought we were keeping
Come on,
the
transfer
student transfers part. Wait, let's talk about this. Let me look at the one, your copy here.
5131. It's all
Crossed
out.
It's all crossed out. Well, it's gone. Forget it. All right, now, 5223,
I think we know, you just gotta.
release time for religious instruction. This hooks itself to HB 8. It suggests that we must have a policy and a whole, procedure to allow students to leave within the school day for a religious course from a sponsoring entity to be named later. One of the things you want to look at in the I guess it's the second paragraph where it says the students, it used to be the students may be provided release time. The whole thing changed when the legislature decided it should be the students shall be provided release time. And, so that's why we are where we are in terms of, what we're.
So the way this
Choosing
is
here.
written, so this is a legal requirement to have a policy for this. And so the policy committee then drafted this. And the result of it is that if that happened, that release time would only be able to happen during a non-curricular time, so it would be lunchtime. Yeah.
Can I just, it didn't say, did it, unless I didn't read it, like, is it every day, length of time? It doesn't establish like
It-
with what
No.
frequency.
It does not say, and I don't
Something they
think,
could say every day, I'm leaving.
I don't think we wanted to get in that, well, because though, depending on what each program is, they would first have to go to the principal and then eventually the superintendent to have some kind of schedule.
Right.
And we're gonna come back and say you can't be absent for curriculum, which we consider everything we teach, because we teach the whole child. So that leaves you with lunch.
But they can live every day at lunch.
Right, now there's a special section that got added if you're on free and reduced lunch, then that has to be dealt with
Right.
in one way or the other. It's our understanding there are whole companies that want to set up
Yes.
a religious, I don't know what to call it, interaction.
This is another
Program.
case, the opening language, I think, is important for everyone to know. This is not of our own making. It says the Board of Education desires to cooperate with those parents who wish to provide religious instruction for their children. I mean, we didn't come up with this. This is not our idea. We're being forced to do this by the state of Ohio. And I think that opening paragraph needs to, again, identify the agent of this change, and it's not us.
Like your opening.
At least it's not.
Right.
It's not,
Okay,
it's not.
I'm- yeah. All right, it's under review. Okay, the next one is 5330, which is the use of medications. This has, once more, it has different options, but you know that because you have the options and I don't. This hooks to HB 70. It's been modified from one we've already had on the agenda in terms of especially taking over the counter drugs and who can administer them. So I didn't know if anyone has a specific question on that. I'm gonna take a quick look at what it looks like without the options.
Just a thought, some of the language here, I think, would be helpful for that earlier policy that we were looking at dealing with controlled substances that needed a little more owning, or wordsmithing, a little narrowing, and so, this might be some language we could, or our provider could use as well, when we talk about controlled substances and needles and just like very large category. This might help narrow that by way of an exception for that earlier policy, but again, just making connections.
All right. On that note, then, I think maybe we will add it to the review, but not necessarily to review this policy.
Right.
Just to look at the language.
Yeah.
In terms of where it might Like, go next.
Yeah.
All right, next one on my list is 5350. And this is, student well-being and suicide prevention. This one is, it talks about initiatives that promote emotional and physical safety. And then, has a section on the training of the staff to be part of these programs. Are there any questions while I look for mine? Sorry, I'm going back to.
So the note I have here is that Ohio Department of Education Workforce, they require us to teach certain topics, in student health and wellness. And so this identifies those topics, and we have to have some mechanism to adopt those topics. That's what this policy speaks to. And that's required. And so whatever that mechanism is, if we adopted every curricular component by the board, those would be in it. Now, since we don't do that, we've got to have a mechanism to do that. That's my understanding of this.
Okay.
Don't we have state standards and?
We do, but we don't go through and adopt each one of those individually in a fashion like this.
Any question?
I'm telling myself.
Okay.
So the direction I have is as long as the Board of Education takes action to adopt a prescribed curriculum in accordance with these legal requirements under law, this policy would not be required. But if we did not have an action specifically stating these requirements for those specific topics, then we have to do something similar to this.
Already forgotten, so we do have it.
No,
We don't need it, thank you.
right, so this needs to be in.
I got you. I think it was just making sure that it wasn't like trapping, like that. That's all, just to make sure teachers were okay talking about certain things, right? Like I get it, that it needs to be,
That comes up a little bit later.
yeah, that maybe that one's later.
Yeah.
Okay.
5460 is graduation requirements, and I think these were just, to fit in with the additional, some of the additions. We've been here so long.
I mean, that
everybody's
Wednesday,
confused.
too.
Right.
It's all about schools.
It's all about the seals.
Yes.
Community service seal,
Yes,
performing
that's it,
arts, student
exactly.
engagement.
All right, 5610 is removal, suspension, expulsion, and permanent exclusion of students. This is hooked to HB 206. The superintendent has multiple options for what to do with expelled kids. Is there anything the superintendent would like to add to that?
No, I think
This one kind of spells itself.
it does, and it has allowances for serious
It does.
offenses.
Did
Right.
the dates increase?
Yes.
I thought
The-
so,
the-
from 90
the
to
option,
180?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I was like, just reading that, I felt like that gave you
It
a bigger.
extends the options to discipline based on the occurrence.
And still follow-ups for you too, to say you have to accomplish X, Y, and Z.
Yes,
Right, and he can make them mandatory to.
that's right.
I mean, I think people forget that expulsion in Ohio does not necessarily mean you're out the door, and they
Forevermore.
never come back
Because I
again.
think it surprised all of us, I mean, even
Yeah,
when
it
you're
just
first
means
learning.
81 days later, you're back in and you
Yeah.
have to.
But
figure out
now
what to
anywhere
do.
up to 180.
Yes.
But now it's 180, so that would be a whole school year.
Yeah.
5751 is the parental status of students. This is another one that I don't know that it's something that comes up in Wyoming a great deal, but, if a student is also a parent, it talks about what the schools would do to support them. I don't think there's anything else hidden there. I'm sorry.
We threw some in just to throw us off.
Well, yeah, a couple that you
Well,
want
there could be some.
Well, because now we're ready for a
Okay.
favorite. This one is 5780.01, the Parents' Bill of Rights. And the Parents' Bill of Rights is hooked to HB 8. This one has some changes that, would be in the way, well, they would require us to add some professional development in the conversations that are about how our teachers and children have conversations. That's the only way I can put that. You want to go into more specifics, so.
Well, I will, so the law that this is connected to it goes into effect on April 9th.
I've got
And-
that law, there's
And
some.
that requires the policy to be adopted by July 1st of 2025. And so, with this, I anticipate this might be one to continue to discuss more along the lines of, supporting the legal requirements that are out there, but really thinking about our students and how we best support our students, staff, and families, and also thinking about, we had an earlier conversation about what are our current practices and how can we align with those, best support our students, staff, and families, while also meeting the legal requirements. And so we just have to be comfortable that the language does all of those things.
So I'm going to ask that we put this one into into our packet for review as well.
Right.
The other thing is this one is changing around. There is a whole nother option out there I just read today, regarding, use of pronouns, and they're hooking it to the Parents' Bill of Rights. So this is a ever-changing.
One is proposed new legislation,
And
not
it's-
yet adopted.
Right, it has not been adopted. Yeah, no, that is correct. But Norm did kind of warn us that there were things out there that this might be a ever evolving. So if you don't mind, we'll review it, we'll double check, how it fits in with what we're doing, but then, at a certain point, because it is law, we'll have to.
Just a point of clarification as
Yep.
we move forward and review this later on. At least the copy I have, there's no color code whatsoever. It should it all be green essentially, because this is
When it's brand
the
new.
entire.
This is a
is
new
yours
policy.
green?
The whole thing's new.
Okay, so this should all be, okay,
It's
just so you know, we're not,
Okay, technically, it should all be green.
Okay,
because
that's
But
brand
it's,
new.
since it's new,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's fine.
there's no color. on
Yeah.
it.
Right.
a couple other ones like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the requirements for this law, it's pretty detailed, so I think the policy as it's written is trying to follow the detail of the legal requirements, but we'll continue to investigate.
Well, I
that.
think just like what John said earlier, on the few that are, we know legal that you have to do, if there's an ability to write something in the beginning. I think that's right.
And what do you do when your policies conflict with one another? Like, if this policy would cause a conflict with students' rights through HIPAA or, I don't understand what takes precedence. Like, there are scenarios where I could think of where this would be in conflict with.
So I think the
certain
question is this redefining HIPAA?
Because the parents, it like superseded
Right.
almost with the parents are having parents' rights.
but
And
doesn't
so
law,
that's what's up for discussion, right?
doesn't law supersede a policy?
I don't know. HIPAA.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, a federal law.
It's for HIPAA's.
Any law.
It's for, right.
HIPAA law wouldn't go into place until they're over age 18.
Yeah.
No, I think you have HIPAA rights at like 16, right?
I feel like your parents have access to all your medical records until you're 18.
No, that's, you have, at 16, you get permission, because
Oh, really? Cause.
You don't always have
We
to.
haven't.
But we do have 18-year-olds in, obviously in school, so.
Yeah, so that's
In
fine.
high school.
The Bible.
Sure.
Yeah, there's-
Yeah.
And that's the heart of
Uh-huh,
this, a lot of this language, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna,
I got it.
all right, I wrote it down, we're gonna look at it.
Well, and seeing just clearly,
Yes,
Some kids are having issues, there are serious issues that are being had maybe at home, and so when, it's just a clarity of, if you're really looking for students first, it's not always the, best way to.
Well, yeah, and that
And
kind of
I think
narrowed,
you'll have control of that.
kind of narrowed itself down to under sexuality content and parent notification, that kind of in the middle of the policy. Regarding, and then that's a little flaky too. What is the sexual content? Is it in the curriculum? Is it in the library book? Is it in something that's said in the classroom, something that's said at the lunch table?
Yeah, as this continues to be defined, it
Yeah.
will require
Yeah.
significant, discussion and professional guidance and professional development.
Yeah, because we'll have to,
Significant.
our teachers are gonna have to have
Yes.
some kind of support.
Yes.
This is big.
And also whatever local sense we can give to this, because I think traditionally Wyoming has long valued parental involvement and input and to create.
Correct.
This is a solution looking for a problem. You know, and I feel like this parental bill of rights suggests that we, you know, are newly considering a parent's rights, and I get where this has come from, but in some way we can put in the language something about, you know, we, you know, have long held genuine, we value, and I think the OSBA stated it like this, our stance is on the parental bill of rights, of course, we value a genuine relationship between district and parents. And, you know, somehow our language needs kind of like to follow up what John was saying, that we recognize the current time that we're in, and that we have to follow laws or not get funding or, you know, not be in compliance with the law. But, you know, these are, and I guess if citizens don't like it, maybe they, even though the law's passed, we still can vote and change a vote. So yes, if you like it.
Well, and in Wyoming, we have a wonderful communication with students or teachers. No, sorry, parents are unhappy. They'll come and talk to us.
And I believe we have outlined, this gets beyond, but could be included in this, ways that parents can opt out of things. We already have provisions for, curricular things that parents can opt out of, but this seems to be very specifically geared towards one subject.
Fuzzy at the same time, so that, because yes, if it's a curriculum item, we've got that, we're under control there. But this leads, you know, into conversations about, students receiving instruction regardless of age and developmentally appropriate, and you know, we've got that, we've covered that, but why suddenly a new policy? So we'll take a look and get back to you. The next one, 6151 is about bad checks.
Oh, no segue there.
Do you
Great.
have any,
Good.
you'd like to?
Yes. Great.
We don't text
We
you.
have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would like for people to not write bad checks, and when they do, we charge them the fee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
We don't,
Ooh, I like that one.
all right, the next one, 7421 is restrooms, locker rooms, shower rooms, and changing rooms.
This one should be all green as well.
This should be all green. Yeah, this is a new policy. This hooks itself to SB 104. It designates single occupied, restrooms as, something we already have. This is another one of those, we're covered. We've done this. But nevertheless, here's a policy we have to look at. Gender designation of multi-occupancy pump facilities. It's something we can certainly review, but I think we've met whatever
think
this
there's-
version of law is.
There's specific things in here,
Mm.
us meeting or not, I don't know how much it comes up, for students in our district who may identify differently than they were assigned at birth, but that biological sex portion,
Mhm.
it describes what matters or what counts. It's very around physically present, genitalia and all that kind of thing, without regard to an individual's psychological, chosen or subjective experience of gender. I feel like that wording is very intentional, and specific to right now we engage this, so.
Yeah, there's you said it shows up again, the opposite biological
Yeah,
sex.
the second to last paragraph, well, a number of,
Statement.
last section, yeah.
Right.
Another thing is the shower room though, for us. I know we have individual, restrooms. But like, I can't remember for that since it's delineating that.
Right, that's the structural thing that we'll need to continue to work through, right?
Right. Well,
Because restrooms, having group restrooms and single-use restrooms, we have,
Right.
right? The other pieces of that we're still working through.
one is it's purposeful, and I just said, we're lucky as a district that we already have some of the single-use bathrooms, and people can't afford to just build them.
Right.
For a lot of other districts.
I guess I'm sending this into review, so we'll look at language and, I mean, I guess facility.
Do we have what's our specific question on this one?
We have to do this one.
I think that's really.
Well, it became law in
That's my
February.
question.
It became law in February.
Can
The
we
language
ignore that?
is very ambiguous.
Right.
This one is already law.
Right.
Yeah, I was like to pretend it didn't, but I knew.
So what are we supposed to do? I mean,
Yeah, you're right. What are we saying?
challenge kids, like, let's see your birth certificate, or?
You can go to the bathroom? Oh,
I think it's a little confusion with these violations of this policy. Any student who willfully enters a multi-occupancy facility designated for use by the opposite biological sex for purpose other than what is considered permissible pursuant to this policy. So that means someone who is assigned, male at birth, who is now living as a female, you're going into a female bathroom in our high school is a violation of this policy. I'm asking.
that is correct.
And so then to your point, Kara, what do we do about that? As we put this policy in place.
And refuses to leave the house to do so, the school personnel. So like the school personnel, right?
Well, that's it. Is there, truly, there's a school personnel
At the
person that's gonna be in front of every bathroom from now?
I think so, there is now. That may be the thing that saves us.
OSBA has a special section on their website that is kind of building the discussion on this. And one of the concerns is that there may be some inconsistency between this new policy and some Title IX obligations that we have not to discriminate based on sex. And so, I mean, it's certainly an open question as to the legal and constitutional viability of this. But I mean, that is concern number one. The other concern is, like, as we've been stating all along, these definitions, it appears like we came up with them as a board, and we're just, we're a pass through, essentially. I think we need to tell people these are not of our own making.
Okay, I think I have it all done.
I just really worry about students. First of all, I want to state, we all know this is not a widespread thing. This may be affect a couple of students, but for those couple of students, the targeting that could be, that this would allow for that student, there could be a student who in care with their pediatrician, family, they are, male at birth and have been female for many years. And maybe other kids in school don't necessarily know about it. And maybe we do, maybe we don't, maybe somebody finds out. And the harm to that student in basically outing them is
It's really just horrific. I'm just gonna say that personally. It's wrong. And I hate that we're even talking about this as something we have to implement.
Now, this was a group of policies that I've never seen before. That, really get to your soul. The next one is 7440.01. This is a revised policy. It had a number of options that I think we've updated. We were looking to update this policy because of new technologies. I don't know if there's any question on any of those. I think this one's pretty straightforward. The next one is 8142, which is the criminal history record check for contracted school services. This refers to our RAPAC program, correct? Our the way we check our employees' backgrounds now. They're, this one is what it is. Okay. I would have called it something else, but you know, they didn't call me up and ask me. 8452 is the automated external defibrillation AED and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. This one hooks into HB 47. I don't know if there's anything here.
Do we fund this locally or is this state funded? Is there a line item for this? Because this is changing the curriculum. I mean, no, I guess we could be against teaching 9 through 12 CPR and.
They're doing it in health class now.
Yes, some of it is happening.
Yes, so I know that, if you take the health class during high school, you're getting your CPR certification. And then we already have a fair amount of AEDs doing that.
This also requires an emergency plan. It has a different name. Here we go. The emergency action plan is something a little bit different too, and then it has to be practiced at least quarterly. So I assume that will come out as
Yes.
one of those things they do online, classes online.
Or more so, just because when you're thinking about an AED unit, knowing where that is and how that whole emergency plan works, right?
Okay, that's true. There has to be. And the last one, 8500 food services.
And I'm a person who's concerned about this.
This is one we said we were gonna have Milford take a look at. Have they gotten back to us or? Okay, then I tell you what, we're gonna put this also on the hold. Because we have to have Milford take a look at this. Because of, okay,
You should just make it.
okay, Milford may not look at it for a while. If they're
I got it.
I just want to say real fast, appreciate all of you. I really like our administration, but I mean, like to go through harder policies, it's late, it takes a long time,
Yeah,
it's hard,
sorry
it's not fun. But that we can like have a good conversation about not great policies, I appreciate it. Thanks.
I am too. I appreciate that. So often we get these policies that we just say to you, couple words, keep going.
Right,
It just simply didn't happen this time.
And the second part is, I know I've talked wrong about it, but it's hard, we've all kind of said it, it's like, we're not gonna not be compliant. The struggle is like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna not accept them, which you have the option to, and then you're not compliant, so then it's worse, because then you get dinged and possibly not funding, or whatever that looks like, could be worse. So to really think through those steps, I think, is, I don't know what that means, but it's like, we've historically been, you're compliant.
Just to answer that then, I mean, I had a question from a number of you that says, what happens if we don't adopt these policies? And from our world, one, there's an audit piece. Two, every time that we apply for reimbursement for all of our federal funds, when we submit information for state funding, when I've got reports, there's this long screen and I have to check all these boxes. And the boxes say that we are in compliance with state and federal law. So if I skip that, then then we are at risk of not receiving both our federal and our state funding. So it is a real thing.
Oh, of course.
Because some of you ask, and I don't think I was able to answer that clearly, I think it might be helpful to say it publicly.
Yes.
So that, we certainly don't want to not comply with law, but we were struggling with not being supportive of some of our students who we know need our support. Right.
Sure.
And then we don't get it later.
And
Thank you.
with an abrupt change in practice,
Mhm.
and I think that's
Mhm.
part of the challenge to several.
That makes sense.
Your comment, Heather, reminded me of things we've been through, maybe since 18. I was thinking just the other day about COVID and all the various things that we sort of managed the way through, and this is a new time. Like this next 12 months, 18 months is gonna be another one of those new things, challenging things, very clear, definitive, what's the effect? How do we address it? How do we not just be subject to it, but impact it in certain ways? And so that intentional connecting and advocating, being together and staying together is going to be necessary, and it is enabled because of our ability to kind of understand it, talk it, debate it, discuss it, even disagree about it here, as we then think about what's the right action for our district, what's the right action for the students, all that kind of thing. So I do think it's a time where that time together, that trust, that partnership will come to bear more. And so I appreciate you calling it out as an essential element of how we serve our district well, in what will be a challenging, next 12 months, even for clarity, and understanding what it means to live like education.
Thank you. In terms of we're approving the Board of Education report, we're not approving these policies, so.
We're just,
to me that
we're
these
approving
are
the
approving
report
the
first read.
First read.
Or just
That we
approving it
asked
as
all
a
the
first read.
questions.
All right, so I just want to make that clear.
Separated out. the
I
next
need a
time.
motion to approve the first read.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second. Second. And a roll call.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick? Yes. Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
All right, treasurer's report. And I'm sorry, it is a long meeting and there's more still. Sorry.
Item A, approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on February 24th and the planning meeting of March 11th. Item B, the approval of the statement of revenues and expenditures for month ending February 28th. Item C, accept with appreciation the list of donations from the foundation and the athletic boosters. Item D, the appropriations for March, which include all of the debt payments that we reviewed at Finance Committee. So we do have to make some interest payments on our new debt June 1st. So that was the bulk of those appropriation increases. And item E, approval of the report, please.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
I'll second. May I have a roll call?
Mrs. Aller?
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick?
Yes.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. G?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent's report.
Okay, I had several personnel recommendations. Number one is for unpaid extended family leave. And you can see the staff members that these, are applicable for the agenda. Number two is for unpaid days. Number three is for unpaid FMLA days. Number four is recommendation to approve these non-athletic supplemental contract changes. So these are corrections to the supplemental amounts for these individuals. Number five is recommendation to approve pay for kindergarten welcome day staff. These staff members will be participating in the planning and the implementation of our kindergarten welcome process. It's an incredible process that's been built. And so we thank these individuals for that time. In bringing these students into Wyoming City Schools in a great way. Number six is recommendation to approve home instruction during and after school hours for students that have that need. Number seven is recommendation for curriculum planning time. And this teacher is moving into the role of fifth grade math and science for the remainder of the year. And so that's to support that change. Support those students. Was working within the Cowboy Bell, fifth grade Cowboy Bell. Yep. Number eight, recommendation to approve pay for the staff members' support of the middle school dance. Number nine, recommendation to approve stipends from the Xavier University student teacher. These are cooperating teachers. Number 10 is to approve pay for staff members who have completed their science of reading training. Again, this comes from the state. The one previous, the student teacher or cooperating teacher stipends, those funds come from the university to pay for those staff members, and the funding for the science of reading stipends comes from the state. Number 11 is recommendation to approve the latest batch of volunteers through Rector. Number 12 is a recommendation to approve the summer camp proposal. So you can see numerous camps there for students, which is great. And number 13 is a recommendation to approve the overnight field trip scheduled. This is the Just Right state writing competition scheduled for May.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Feltner?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas? Yes. Mrs. G?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes. Superintendent's update.
Okay, now for the presentation, I wanted to
Perfect.
present.
Yeah, he's got a big presentation.
PowerPoint, right?
That's right, that's right. If you all just person, no.
The binder.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, it's an important meeting for all of the reasons you all suggest. It's a challenge to come back after spring break. It's the day after spring break. This is our final push,
Straight in.
which is an exciting time for our students in the year. We hope all of our families had a great spring break. Really, I won't spend too much time on this because I was just going to go back to what Rhonda had shared from the finance committee meeting, and just important information that is impactful to Wyoming City Schools and the Wyoming budget. And so just wanting to make sure that we end on this important note, because it's something that we just need to be paying attention to. A lot is going to happen over the next several months, and I just want to make sure that we're watching that and ready to advocate for Wyoming City Schools and Wyoming students, specifically around the funding that we think is important for our school district and school districts like us. Yeah, that's really it.
Well, that was quick.
I know, well, I thought
Tired.
you make fun of me for speaking too long, and I thought at 9:48, I might just stay brief.
I was like, we'll wrap this.
Is that a celebration of your health?
Close the fucking down.
Yeah.
All right.
You're next.
Unless someone else has something, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Who wants to be on that?
Take anyone you want.
Mr. Feldmeyer?
One or two, yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yeah.
Mrs. D?
Yes.
Mrs. Dollar?
Yes.
Mrs. Barker?
Yes. Thank you for sticking it out to all of
I
those
know,
who
look
do
at
and
you.
care about this
Standard.
district, as we all do. We'll make this work.